I won the kind of lottery jackpot people whisper about, the kind that makes news anchors smile too widely and strangers suddenly believe in miracles. For one foolish, soft hearted moment, I thought I would keep it secret until Christmas Eve, walk into my parents' dining room, and change everyone's life before dessert. I imagined my mother crying into her napkin, my father standing up, proud at last, my sister covering her mouth in disbelief, my brother finally looking at me like I was not some cautionary tale he could use to feel superior. I had almost handed my future to people who, 1 week before Christmas, decided I was not even worthy of a chair at their table. But I am getting ahead of myself. My name is Grace Miller, and I was 32 years old when my life broke open. Not changed, not shifted, broke open. There are moments when a life does not slowly unravel thread by thread. It snaps. 1 second, you are sitting at your desk, answering emails, pretending the headache behind your eyes is nothing. The next, you are inside a glass-walled conference room with a man from human resources who will not meet your eyes, and a boss who keeps folding and unfolding his hands as if he is the one being hurt. That was how it happened to me. It was a gray Thursday in early October, the kind of day when the city looked washed out, like someone had dragged a wet cloth over every window. I was working at a marketing agency in downtown Chicago, a place with exposed brick walls, overpriced coffee, and people who used words like alignment and brand energy when they meant panic. I had worked there for almost 4 years. Before that, I had worked my way up through two smaller firms, taking every ugly assignment no one else wanted, answering client calls after midnight, and rewriting campaigns over weekends because someone above me had promised impossible results by Monday morning. I was good at my job. That is not arrogance. It is the truth. I knew how to take a vague idea and make it sell. I knew how to read a room, rescue a bad pitch, and turn a client's half-formed complaint into something our team could actually fix. I had 8 years of experience, a portfolio I was proud of, and the kind of exhaustion that comes from being reliable in a company that rewards chaos. The campaign that destroyed me had not been mine to destroy. It was for a major retail client, the biggest account our agency had landed in years. Everyone wanted credit before the work was even done. My boss, Andrew Collins, strutted around the office like a man accepting applause only he could hear. Senior leadership kept changing the strategy. The client kept changing the target audience. Creative directors kept promising dramatic pivots without checking timelines. Every week, the campaign became something else. And every week, Andrew walked into my office with a smile that meant bad news. "Grace, I need you to make this happen." That was his favorite sentence. Not, "Can this be done?" Not, "What support do you need?" Not, "Is this realistic?" Just, "Make this happen." So I did. Again and again. I stayed late. I took calls in the grocery store. I canceled dinner plans. I defended decisions I had not made and softened messages from executives who never wanted their fingerprints on anything risky. Then the launch failed. Not quietly either. It failed in the public, humiliating way that gives executives heartburn. The client hated the final direction. The response online was colder than expected, and suddenly, everyone who had fought to be associated with the project took 3 silent steps backward. Someone had to stand in front of the wreckage. Apparently, that someone was me. Andrew called me into the conference room at 10:17 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I had just looked at my phone after sending a revised report to a client who had no idea I was about to be sacrificed. The HR woman, whose name was Paula, sat with a folder in front of her. She gave me a careful little smile, the kind people give at funerals when they do not know the deceased well. Andrew cleared his throat. "Grace, as you know, the company has been reevaluating departmental structure." I looked at him. Departmental structure? He nodded, relieved that I had repeated something neutral. Yes, leadership has made some difficult decisions. My stomach went still. Not dropped, not twisted, stilled. There is a particular silence your body makes before bad news arrives. Paula slid the folder toward me. Your position is being eliminated as part of an internal restructuring. I stared at the folder. It was beige, cheap. The tab had my name printed on it in black ink. My whole career reduced to a folder. Eliminated, I said. Andrew looked down. This has nothing to do with your value as a person. That was when I knew they had rehearsed it. People only say things like that when they are doing something cruel and want credit for sounding humane. I wanted to ask him if it had anything to do with the failed campaign. I wanted to ask if leadership had mentioned that I had warned them 3 times about the timeline, twice about the inconsistent strategy, and once in writing about the client's confusion. I wanted to open my laptop, pull up every email, and make him read his own responses aloud. But I looked at his face and understood that truth would not save me. The decision had already been made. The script had already been written. I was only there to perform my part. Paula explained severance. Andrew said something about being happy to provide a reference. I heard words like transition, support, and future opportunities, but they floated past me like paper boats in dirty water. I signed what needed signing. I packed my desk in a cardboard box while people pretended not to watch. One coworker, Maya, hugged me tightly near the elevators and whispered, "This is disgusting. Everyone knows it wasn't you." I almost cried then. Not in the conference room. Not when Andrew lied. Not when I put my framed certificate into the box. But when someone said the truth softly, I almost broke. Instead, I smiled. Because that is what I had been trained to do. I smiled, thanked her, carried my box to the parking garage, and drove home with both hands locked around the steering wheel. Traffic was terrible. Of course it was. The sky had darkened, rain tapping against the windshield, red brake lights stretching ahead like a warning I had ignored for years. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not call anyone from the car. I just drove through downtown Chicago, feeling like my life had become something I was watching from far away. By the time I reached my apartment in Lakeview, the rain had turned heavy. My apartment was small but mine. 1 bedroom, old hardwood floors, a narrow kitchen, and windows that looked onto the brick side of another building. It was not glamorous, but I had paid for every chair, every lamp, every chipped mug. I had built that little life myself. I set the cardboard box on the floor, took off my coat, and stood in the center of the living room. The silence was immense. For the first time in years, no one needed anything from me. No client email, no emergency revision, no quick call, no Andrew appearing at my door with another impossible request dressed up as opportunity. I should have been terrified. Instead, beneath the shock and humiliation, there was a thin line of relief. I had savings. Not forever money, but enough. I had been careful. Maybe too careful. While other people from work spent bonuses on trips and designer bags, I paid down debt, added to savings, and kept a spreadsheet that made my sister laugh whenever she heard about it. I could survive several months. I told myself that as I made tea, I did not want, and sat on the couch without drinking it. I could rest for a week, maybe 2. Then I would update my resume, call contacts, take interviews, find something better, something less poisonous, something where my entire worth did not depend on making powerful people look competent. That was the first lie I told myself after losing my job, that the world would give me room to breathe. The second was that my family would comfort me. I called my mother first. Margaret Miller believed bad news should be handled immediately, preferably with advice no one had asked for. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Grace, I'm in the middle of something. Is it quick?" I swallowed. "I lost my job today." There was a pause. Not the warm, stunned pause of concern, more like the pause before someone calculates how your misfortune might inconvenience them. What do you mean, lost it? They said it was restructuring. She sighed. That sigh cut deeper than I expected. Oh, Grace. 2 words. Not soft, not sympathetic, heavy with disappointment, as if I had misplaced something expensive. I'm okay, I said quickly, because suddenly I felt responsible for making my own bad news less upsetting to her. I have savings. I'm going to take a little time and then start applying. You should call Daniel. I blinked. What? Daniel, you should call him and apologize. I stared at the wall. Mom, why would I call Daniel? Because he has a house. Because he wanted to marry you. Because you may need somewhere stable if you can't keep paying rent. My throat tightened. I can pay my rent? For now. I have savings. Savings run out. I know that. I'm going to find another job. My mother made a small, impatient sound. You always think you can do everything alone. That was not true. I had never wanted to do everything alone. I had simply learned not to expect anyone to stand beside me, unless I was succeeding loudly enough to make them proud. Daniel was my ex-boyfriend. We had broken up 6 months earlier after 3 years together. He was charming in public, thoughtful when he wanted to be, and deeply convinced that a woman's ambition was attractive only until it interfered with his plans. He had wanted marriage. So had I, in theory. But Daniel's version of marriage required me to shrink. He wanted me to leave my job eventually, move into his house in the suburbs, have children quickly, and stop living like everything is a competition. By competition, he meant career. By peace, he meant obedience. The final fight had happened in his kitchen. He had been making pasta, stirring sauce like we were discussing weather instead of my future. You don't have to work this hard, he said. I want to build something. With what end goal? More stress? More late nights? More men like Andrew calling you at dinner? That's not fair. It's realistic. No, I said. It's convenient for you. He had turned off the stove then. His face changed. I'm offering you a good life, Grace. I know. And you're acting like I'm insulting you. Because you keep describing a life where I disappear. He did not understand. Or maybe he understood perfectly and hated that I had said it. We ended things 2 weeks later. Now my mother wanted me to crawl back to him because I had been unemployed for less than 12 hours. I'm not calling Daniel, I said. Pride won't pay bills. Neither will marrying someone who wants to control me. Control you? She laughed once. You young women call everything control now. Maybe he just wanted to take care of you. I closed my eyes. I shouldn't have called. Don't be dramatic. I'm trying to help. No, I thought. You are trying to place me somewhere less embarrassing. But I did not say it. I ended the call politely because even then I was still performing, still trying to be a good daughter, still hoping that if I remained calm enough, reasonable enough, useful enough, my family might eventually love me without conditions. My sister called an hour later. Rebecca was 4 years older than me and had mastered the art of sounding concerned while making sure you knew she was superior. She lived in a large house in Naperville with her husband, Mark, and their 2 children. She posted photos of holiday tables, school events, and inspirational quotes about gratitude. She also once told me that women who focused too much on careers usually ended up lonely and bitter, then insisted I was too sensitive when I got quiet. Mom told me, she said. Of course she had. I'm fine, I said. Are you? Yes, because this is serious, Grace. I'm aware. I talked to Dad. The company where he still consults might be hiring administrative staff. He could probably get you in. I frowned. Administrative staff? It would be entry level, but right now you shouldn't be picky. I'm not entry level. I have 8 years of marketing experience. Yes, but you currently have no job. The words landed cleanly, efficiently, like she had been waiting to say them. I'm going to look for marketing roles. Rebecca sighed exactly like my mother. That family sigh, the one that said I was stubborn, foolish, and not quite worth the effort of explaining reality to. You need to be practical. I am being practical. No, you're being proud. There's a difference. I stood and walked to the kitchen just to do something with my body. I didn't call for a lecture. You didn't call me at all. That silenced me. She was right. She had called me. Not because she wanted to comfort me, but because bad news traveled through our family faster than kindness ever did. I'm tired, I said. Fine, but don't wait until you're desperate and then expect everyone to rescue you. Everyone. As if there had ever been an everyone. My brother Ethan called the next day. He was the youngest, married with 2 children, and treated adulthood like a competition he was winning because he had followed the family-approved path. Corporate job, house, wife, kids, church on holidays, opinions about everyone else's life. I heard what happened, he said. Good morning to you too. I'm serious, Grace. Maybe this is a sign. A sign of what? That you should stop chasing professional validation and focus on what actually matters. I knew where this was going, but I let him continue because some part of me still needed to hear how low the bar was. You're 32, he said. You're not old, but you're not 25 either. Maybe instead of trying to climb some corporate ladder that clearly isn't loyal to you, you should think about settling down. Settling down with whom? I don't know. Daniel, maybe? Or someone else? Mom said Daniel might still talk to you. I laughed, but it came out sharp. Did you all have a meeting? Don't be like that. Like what? Difficult. There it was. Not hurt, not scared, not recently fired. Difficult. I have to go, I said. Grace? I hung up. For 3 days after that, I did not answer family calls. I cleaned my apartment. I slept too much, then not enough. I opened my resume and stared at it until the words blurred. I made lists of companies, deleted them, made new lists, deleted those too. I told myself I was regrouping, but mostly I was trying not to hear Andrew's voice saying internal restructuring and my mother's voice saying, call Daniel. By the second week, my family began treating my unemployment not like a temporary setback, but like a contagious disease. My mother sent articles about budgeting, most of them insulting. 10 ways to stretch a grocery budget. How to make dish soap last twice as long. Living with less. A humbling opportunity. She texted one afternoon, you can water down dish soap. It still works. I stared at the message for a full minute. I had managed national campaigns. I had negotiated 6-figure budgets. I had once flown to Denver with 4 hours' notice to rescue a client presentation. Now, my mother was instructing me on diluted dish soap. My father, Thomas, called less often. But when he did, his concern came wrapped in criticism. Do you really need the car? He asked one evening. Yes, Dad. Gas is expensive. I'm aware. You live in the city. You could walk more. I do walk. I'm just saying, when money stops coming in, you have to cut luxuries. My car is 10 years old. Still, my father had always believed money revealed character. Specifically, other people's character. When he spent, it was necessary. When others spent, it was weakness. He had worked hard his whole life, and I respected that. But somewhere along the way, his hard work had turned into a measuring stick he used to strike everyone around him. Rebecca started forwarding grocery store promotions. Not once. Not twice. Constantly. Chicken thighs on sale. Laundry detergent. Frozen vegetables. Coupons for canned soup. Each message came with little comments. Thought of you? This might help. You should really plan ahead now. I wanted to reply, I have more in savings than you had when you bought your first house. But I did not, because saying I was not desperate would have sounded defensive, and defending myself to my family had always felt like trying to bail water from a sinking boat with a spoon. No matter how much I explained, they preferred the version of me they had already chosen. The failure, the stubborn one, the woman who should have married Daniel, the daughter who had flown too close to ambition and fallen exactly where they expected. 3 weeks after losing my job, my mother invited me to Sunday dinner. I almost said no. I should have said no. But loneliness is not logical. I had spent too many days inside my apartment, pretending rest was the same as peace. I missed noise. I missed the smell of food someone else had cooked. I missed, or thought I missed, the illusion of belonging. My parents lived in a quiet house in Oak Park, the same house where we had grown up. Brick exterior, narrow porch, maple tree out front. My mother decorated early for every season, and by the first week of November, there were already autumn wreaths on the door and ceramic pumpkins on the entry table. When I arrived, the house smelled like roast chicken, buttered rolls, and the cinnamon candle my mother lit whenever guests came over. Not family. Guests. That distinction mattered, though I did not understand how much until later. Rebecca was already there with Mark. Ethan had come with his wife Lauren and their kids, who were watching cartoons too loudly in the den. My father sat in his recliner reading news on his tablet. "Hi," I said, stepping inside. My mother looked me over quickly. Too quickly. Her eyes moved from my coat to my boots to my purse, as if checking whether unemployment had started showing on me physically. "You look tired," she said. "Good to see you too, Mom." She ignored that. "Dinner's almost ready." Rebecca gave me a careful smile from the sofa. Mark nodded. Ethan lifted 2 fingers in greeting without getting up. No one hugged me. That should not have mattered. We were not an overly affectionate family, but something about the lack of touch made me feel like I had arrived carrying bad weather. At dinner, my mother set the table with the good serving dishes. She had made roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, salad, and rolls wrapped in a cloth napkin. It was the kind of meal meant to suggest warmth, tradition, family. I stood near the dining room entrance while everyone moved toward their seats. That was when I noticed. No one sat beside me. Not accidentally, not because the table was crowded. There were 8 chairs, 7 adults. The children had already eaten in the kitchen. I sat on one side of the table, and the chairs to my immediate left and right remained empty. Rebecca sat across from me beside Mark. Ethan sat near Dad. Lauren took the chair beside him. My mother busied herself in the kitchen for several extra minutes before finally taking the seat at the far end, diagonally away from me. 2 empty chairs hugged me like a verdict. For a few seconds, I could not breathe normally. I looked at the empty chair on my left, then the one on my right, and understood with sickening clarity that my family had arranged itself around my failure, as if unemployment might rub off through elbows, as if sitting too close to me might stain them. No one said anything about it. That made it worse. Cruelty announced out loud can be confronted. Quiet cruelty sits in the room and dares you to name it, knowing everyone will call you dramatic if you do. So I did what I had been trained to do. I smiled. I passed the rolls. I complimented the chicken. I answered my father's questions about my job search with vague calm. I let Rebecca explain that one of her neighbors knew someone in recruiting and might be able to look at my resume if I was open to feedback. I listened while Ethan talked about his promotion, making sure to mention how important stability was when you had a family. My mother asked if I wanted more potatoes. I said yes because my throat hurt too much to say anything else. Halfway through dinner, Ethan's daughter, Lily, ran in holding a crayon drawing. "Aunt Grace, look!" She came straight to me, innocent and bright, and leaned against my chair to show me a house with a purple roof and 4 people standing beside it. "It's beautiful," I said, my voice cracking slightly. Before I could ask who the people were, Lauren called from the doorway, "Lily, come on, let Aunt Gracie." Lily frowned. "But I'm showing her." "Now, honey." The child ran back out. I looked down at my plate. The empty chair seemed larger after that. I left early. My mother walked me to the door and handed me leftovers in a plastic container. "Don't waste these," she said. "That chicken can last you a few meals." I took the container. "Thanks." She hesitated. For one fragile second, I thought she might hug me. Apologize. Say she knew this was hard and that things would be okay. Instead, she said, "You should really think about calling Daniel." I walked to my car in the cold and sat behind the wheel until my hands stopped shaking. That night, alone in my apartment, I ate the leftover chicken standing at the kitchen counter. It tasted like humiliation. The only ritual that kept me from sinking completely was Friday. Every Friday, for almost 5 years, I bought lottery tickets. Not many, not the kind of spending people use to ruin themselves. Just a few lines, always the same small amount. It had started as a joke after a terrible work week years earlier, when Maya and I stopped at a convenience store and bought tickets while laughing about what we would do if we became rich enough to quit dramatically. She said she would buy a farm. I said I would buy silence. The habit stayed. Every Friday evening, I walked to the same little convenience store on Belmont Avenue. The owner, Mr. Harris, knew me by name. He was in his 60s with silver hair, warm eyes, and an old radio behind the counter that always played either baseball commentary or soft jazz. "Here comes my future millionaire," he would say whenever I entered. "From your mouth to God's ears," I always replied. I bought 6 combinations. Powerball with the extra multiplier when the jackpot was high. It cost less than dinner out, less than a blouse Rebecca would buy without thinking, less than the price of one cocktail at the bars my coworkers loved. But to my family, those tickets were proof of irresponsibility. "What a waste of money," Rebecca said once when she saw them in my purse. "It's $24. $24 every week adds up. So does your wine subscription." She did not appreciate that. My mother hated the tickets too. "People who gamble always think they're about to be saved," she said. "I'm not gambling away the rent. I'm buying a daydream." Daydreams are for people who don't have plans. That was my family's greatest talent, taking even the smallest joy and turning it into evidence against me. But I kept buying the tickets, not because I truly believed I would win. I did not. Not really. I knew the odds were absurd. I knew lightning was more likely to strike, and even lightning had better things to do. I bought them because for 5 minutes every Friday, I could imagine a life where no one got to speak to me like I was a burden. I imagined paying off my parents' mortgage and watching my father's face soften. I imagined clearing Rebecca's debts, not because she deserved it, but because I knew the pressure behind her perfect photos. I imagined setting up college funds for Ethan's children. I imagined buying myself a house with a room full of windows and no one in it who made me feel small. The fantasy was never just about money. It was about breath. It was about waking up and not owing anyone an explanation for existing. At the beginning of December, the jackpot climbed so high that everyone was talking about it. News anchors mentioned it between weather updates. People at grocery stores stood in longer lottery lines. Office workers, retirees, students, and people who had never bought a ticket in their lives suddenly had theories about lucky numbers. By then, I had been unemployed for nearly 2 months. My savings were still fine, but my confidence had worn thin in places. I had applied to dozens of jobs, taken several interviews, and been rejected with polite emails that all sounded like they had been written by the same dead-eyed machine. "We were impressed by your background. We have decided to move forward with other candidates. We encourage you to apply again." Every rejection made my mother's voice louder in my head. "Call Daniel. Entry level is better than nothing. You are not in a position to be picky." Failure, I was learning, does not need to be spoken every day to be heard. Sometimes it is in the way your sister asks whether you have considered lowering your expectations. Sometimes it is in your father's reminder that health insurance is expensive. Sometimes it is in your mother texting you a link to a church job board with the message, "Maybe humility is what you need right now." On the first Friday of December, I went to buy my tickets as usual. Snow had fallen earlier that day, not enough to make the city beautiful, just enough to turn sidewalks wet and gray. The air smelled like exhaust and cold metal. People hurried past with collars pulled high, already carrying Christmas shopping bags and paper cups of coffee. Inside the convenience store, Mr. Harris looked up from behind the counter and smiled. "There she is," he said. "You hear how big the jackpot is?" I heard. "Historic." "So everyone keeps saying." He printed my tickets slowly, carefully, as if performing a sacred duty. "You know," he said, sliding them across the counter, "somebody's got to win." I laughed. "That's how they get us." "No, no." He tapped the tickets with one finger. "This could be the one. You say that every week. One week I'll be right." I put the tickets into my wallet. "And when you are, I'll buy you this whole store." He chuckled. "I'll hold you to that, Ms. Grace." On the walk home, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "Christmas Eve dinner will be at 6. Don't be late this year." I stared at it while standing under the awning of a closed dry cleaner. "Don't be late this year." Not, "Are you coming?" Not, "We'd love to have you." Not, "How are you holding up?" A command. Still, I felt a small, pathetic flicker of relief. I was invited, even after the empty chairs. Even after the advice and criticism and quiet shame, I was still expected at Christmas Eve dinner. That meant something to me then. I wish it had not. I replied, "I'll be there." My mother sent back a thumbs up emoji. That was all. When I reached my apartment, I placed the lottery tickets in the small ceramic bowl near the door where I kept keys, receipts, and loose change. Then I reheated soup, opened my laptop, and tried to work on another cover letter. The words would not come. "Why are you a good fit for this role?" I wanted to write, "Because I know how to survive being blamed for other people's failures." Instead, I typed something professional about strategic thinking and client communication. Later that night, I called no one. No one called me. I sat on the couch with the TV playing a show I did not follow and watched colored Christmas lights blink in the apartment window across the alley. A couple lived there. I had seen them sometimes, cooking together, dancing once while washing dishes. That night, they were decorating a small tree. The woman held up ornaments while the man untangled lights. They laughed when one strand flickered out. I looked away. Envy is ugly, but loneliness makes it honest. I did not envy their tree. Or their apartment. Or even their happiness, exactly. I envied the ease of being wanted in a room. The next morning, I woke late. The sky was clear, sunlight slicing through the blinds in pale winter stripes. For a few seconds before memory returned, I felt almost peaceful. Then the familiar weight settled over me. No job. No plan my family respected. No certainty. I made coffee, burned the first piece of toast, and opened my laptop. My phone sat beside the mug. Out of habit, more than hope, I checked the lottery website. The jackpot numbers were posted. I almost did not reach for my ticket. People like me did not win jackpots like that. People like me bought tiny fantasies and then returned to real life. We refreshed email inboxes. We stretched savings. We endured family dinners with empty chairs on both sides. Still, I took the ticket from my wallet. The first number matched. I smiled faintly. That happens sometimes. One number, maybe two. The second number matched. I leaned closer. The third number matched. My smile disappeared. I picked up the ticket and held it nearer to the screen. The fourth number matched. A strange rushing sound filled my ears. "No," I whispered. The fifth number matched. My hands went cold. I checked the Powerball. Then I checked it again. Then I stopped breathing altogether. All 6 numbers matched. For several seconds, nothing in the world moved. The coffee maker clicked off in the kitchen. A car horn sounded somewhere outside. Pipes knocked inside the wall as heat moved through the building. I sat at my small kitchen table in my old sweatshirt, holding a piece of paper worth more money than anyone in my family had ever imagined touching. More than $500 million. The number on the screen looked fake, obscene, impossible. Too large to belong to a life like mine. I refreshed the page. The numbers remained. I checked the date. Correct. I checked my ticket again. Correct. I opened another website. Same numbers. I searched the state lottery announcement. Same numbers. My body began to shake so violently that I had to put the ticket flat on the table before I dropped it. I did not scream. I did not jump. I did not celebrate. I sat there for nearly 20 minutes, staring between the screen and the ticket, waiting for the universe to correct itself. Because surely this was a mistake. Surely someone would knock on the door and say there had been an error. Surely I had read something wrong. Surely numbers that could change a human life so completely did not just sit quietly on a cheap printed slip in a ceramic bowl by the door. But no correction came. The ticket was real. The money was real. And my first instinct, God help me, was to call my mother. I reached for the phone with trembling fingers. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted her to cry and say she was sorry for doubting me. I wanted to hear my father's voice break with pride. I wanted Rebecca to be stunned into kindness. I wanted Ethan to apologize for treating my life like a failed lesson. I wanted, with a desperation that embarrassed me even then, to be welcomed back into my own family as someone valuable. I had my mother's contact open. My thumb hovered above the call button. Then I saw the Sunday dinner table, the empty chair on my left, the empty chair on my right, my mother's voice at the door. Don't waste the chicken. Rebecca's forwarded coupons. My father telling me to walk more to save gas. Ethan saying maybe losing my job was a sign I should stop chasing professional dreams. The memory gathered itself slowly, then stood between me and the phone. I lowered my hand. Not yet. That was what I told myself. I would not tell them yet. Not because I planned to punish them. Not then. I was not angry enough yet to understand what they deserved. I was still too trained in loyalty, too hungry for reconciliation, too willing to excuse cruelty if it came wrapped in the word family. I told myself I would wait until Christmas Eve. It would be perfect that way. Dramatic, yes, but beautiful. A redemption scene. A family miracle. I would walk into the dining room, sit at the table where they had once left space around me like I was contaminated, and after dinner, I would tell them. I would tell them I had won. I would tell them they never had to worry again. I would help my parents retire comfortably, pay off Rebecca's house, create college funds for Ethan's children, maybe give everyone enough to breathe. Yes, they had hurt me. Yes, they had judged me. But they were my family, and I, still foolish then, believed that family meant people could hurt you deeply and still deserve the best of you. So I did not call. I placed the ticket inside a book, then placed the book inside a drawer, then stood there terrified that the drawer itself might somehow betray me. For the first time since losing my job, the apartment felt too small to contain my life. I had no idea that in less than 2 weeks, my mother would call me with a calm voice and remove me from Christmas Eve dinner as if crossing a spoiled item off a grocery list. I had no idea she would say my failure was contagious. I had no idea that the money I wanted to use to bring my family together would instead show me exactly why I needed to leave them behind. At that moment, I only stood in my kitchen, holding my own secret like a flame cupped between both hands, and imagined the faces of people who had not yet proven they did not deserve to see its light. For 3 days after I discovered the ticket, I lived like a woman carrying a bomb in her purse. Not a treasure, not a blessing, a bomb. That was the first thing no one tells you about sudden fortune. People imagine screaming, champagne, phone calls, jumping up and down in the kitchen with tears of joy running down your face. Maybe some winners do that. Maybe some people are born with the instinct to celebrate before they fear. I was not one of them. I became quiet, careful, almost paranoid. I kept the ticket inside a hardcover book, then wrapped that book in an old scarf, then put it in a storage box under sweaters I had not worn in years. 10 minutes later, I took it out because the box seemed too obvious. Then I hid it in a folder with tax documents. Then I decided that was worse. By noon, I had moved it 7 times. Every sound in the hallway made my heart stop. The neighbor's dog barked, and I imagined someone outside my door who somehow knew. A delivery truck rattled in the alley, and I thought of thieves. My phone buzzed, and I jumped as if the lottery commission itself had found a way to call me. It is ridiculous now, looking back. But that tiny slip of paper had turned my one-bedroom apartment into a vault with bad locks. By Monday morning, I knew I needed help. Not family help, not advice from people who thought watering down dish soap was financial planning. Real help, professional help, the kind rich people already knew how to find before they became rich. I spent hours researching attorneys, financial advisors, lottery lawyers, tax specialists, and wealth management firms. I read articles until my eyes burned. I learned that winners made terrible mistakes when they moved too fast, spoke too soon, trusted too easily. I learned that people sued. Relatives appeared. Old friends remembered debts that had never existed. Strangers wrote letters. Churches called. Cousins multiplied. The money was not even in my account yet, and already I felt hunted by people who did not know I existed. That afternoon, I contacted a law firm that specialized in large financial windfalls. The receptionist transferred me twice before a calm male voice answered. "This is Richard Hayes." I sat straighter at my kitchen table, as if he could see me through the phone. "Mr. Hayes, my name is Grace Miller. I need legal and financial guidance regarding a lottery prize." There was a pause, a professional pause. Not shocked, not excited. "What size prize are we discussing, Ms. Miller?" I looked at the ticket lying on the table in front of me. I had taken it out again, unable to trust any hiding place. "Over $500 million. This time, the pause was different. Still controlled, but heavier. "I see," he said. "First, do not tell anyone else. Second, do not sign the back of the ticket until we determine the best claiming structure available in your state. Third, put the ticket somewhere secure today. A bank safe deposit box if possible. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning?" "Yes." "Have you told anyone?" "No." "Good. Keep it that way." Something about his voice steadied me. For the first time since Saturday morning, I felt less like a terrified woman with a secret and more like someone who could make decisions. The next day, I wore a navy blazer to his office because I had no idea what one wore to discuss becoming unbelievably wealthy. The office was in a tall building with marble floors and elevators that smelled faintly of expensive cologne. Richard Hayes looked exactly like the kind of man people trusted with large numbers. Mid-50s, silver at the temples, precise suit, calm eyes that missed nothing. He shook my hand and did not congratulate me immediately. I appreciated that. He led me into a conference room where another attorney and a tax advisor joined us. They explained everything slowly: claiming options, taxes, public records, trusts, asset protection, security, banking, investment structures, privacy limitations, the importance of not making promises in the emotional early days. "You are going to feel generous," Richard said. "I already do. That is normal. It is also dangerous." I looked down at my hands. I wanted to surprise my family on Christmas Eve. All three of them went very still in that polite professional way that told me they had heard much worse. Richard leaned back slightly. "May I ask what your relationship with your family is like?" I almost lied. The instinct rose automatically. "My family is complicated, but loving. We have our issues, but they mean well. They have always been there for me." That was a script I had repeated to friends, coworkers, boyfriends, even myself. A protective spell. If I said it enough, maybe it would become true. Instead, perhaps because the ticket had made lying feel suddenly expensive, I said, "They have been cruel since I lost my job." Richard did not react. "Cruel how?" I told him. "Not everything, not every old wound, but enough." I told him about my mother telling me to call Daniel, about my sister suggesting an entry-level administrative job as if my career had been imaginary, about my brother saying unemployment was a sign I should find a husband, about the empty chairs at Sunday dinner. When I finished, the room was quiet. The tax advisor looked uncomfortable. The younger attorney looked angry on my behalf. Richard simply nodded once. "Ms. Miller," he said, "money does not change relationships as much as it reveals them. Sometimes it reveals love, sometimes entitlement, sometimes resentment, often all three. They are still my family. I am not disputing that. I want to help them. That may be possible later with structure, but I strongly advise you not to announce this at a family dinner." I almost smiled. "You make it sound like setting off fireworks indoors. That is not far from what it would be." He explained how wealthy families use trusts, scheduled distributions, legal boundaries, and written agreements. He talked about the difference between helping and becoming an open bank account. He said that once people believed they had a claim to my money, every no would feel to them like theft. I listened. I understood. And still, in the softest, most foolish part of myself, I pictured Christmas Eve. My mother's dining room lit by candles, my father at the head of the table, Rebecca's children running around in holiday clothes, Ethan pouring wine, the smell of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and pine. I imagined standing after dinner, my hands shaking and saying, "I have something to tell you." Then the gasp. Then the tears. Then, finally, pride. You can know better and still want the fantasy. That is another thing no one tells you. Over the next week, my life split in two. On the surface, nothing changed. I still lived in my little apartment. I still wore the same coat. I still drank coffee from a chipped mug and replied to job rejection emails with polite thank you notes. I still ignored forwarded coupons from Rebecca and budgeting articles from my mother. Underneath, everything changed. With Richard's help, I moved carefully. The ticket went into secure storage. The claim process began through the proper legal channels. Documents were prepared, tax implications were calculated. Every step felt unreal, like I was watching a movie about someone who happened to have my name. When the numbers became official and unavoidable, I learned what the prize truly meant after taxes and planning. It was still absurd. Generational wealth. That was the phrase one advisor used. I hated how cold it sounded. To me, it felt like oxygen. Enough money to never again ask permission to survive. Enough to buy a home outright. Enough to walk away from any room where people treated me like a problem. Enough to be generous without destroying myself if I learned how. Richard insisted on patience. No major emotional spending. I agreed. No loans to relatives. I agreed, though it hurt. No announcements without a plan. I agreed to that too. Then I went home and made a handwritten list of everything I wanted to do for my family. For mom and dad, pay off the mortgage, establish retirement accounts, hire a housekeeper if mom wanted one, cover medical expenses. For Rebecca and Mark, pay off their house, create education funds for the kids, maybe help with their credit card debt if it was worse than she admitted. For Ethan and Lauren, college funds for both children, maybe a home renovation, maybe a savings trust. For Aunt Clara, my mother's younger sister, the only adult in my family who had ever made me feel listened to. Whatever she needed, no questions asked. I looked at the list for a long time. Then I folded it and placed it in a drawer. I still plan to help them. I want that understood. Even after everything they had said. Even after the empty chairs. Even after being treated like a contagious failure, I still plan to change their lives. That was how deeply I had been trained to confuse love with sacrifice. By mid-December, Christmas had taken over the city. Lights wrapped around trees. Store windows glittered. Couples carried shopping bags through slush. Families lined up for photos under giant wreaths. Everywhere I looked, people seemed to belong to someone. My family group chat became busy with holiday logistics. Rebecca asked who was bringing dessert. Ethan posted a joke about needing extra wine to survive mom's cooking schedule. My father sent a weather update no one had asked for. My mother responded with instructions, corrections, and reminders, ruling Christmas Eve like a general preparing for war. I mostly stayed quiet. On December 17th, Rebecca texted me privately. "Are you bringing anything this year?" I stared at the message. In the past, I always brought wine or dessert. Something nice enough for my mother to say I had spent too much and Rebecca to ask where it was from. This year, I considered offering to bring nothing. I considered offering to bring everything. I considered saying, actually, I might be bringing salvation, but please let me know if you prefer red or white. Instead, I typed, I can bring dessert. Rebecca replied, maybe store-bought is fine. No need to spend a lot right now. No need to spend a lot right now. I looked around my apartment, where documents tied to hundreds of millions of dollars sat locked in a briefcase Richard had recommended, and started laughing. It was not a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that escapes when reality becomes too strange to hold. A week before Christmas Eve, my mother called. I remember exactly where I was standing, in the kitchen, slicing an apple I did not want. The knife was halfway through when her name appeared on my phone. I answered because, despite everything, I still thought the call might be about dinner. Hi, Mom. Grace, she said. We need to talk. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Administrative. The same tone she used when calling the pharmacy or arguing with the cable company. What happened? She exhaled softly. Your father and I have been discussing Christmas Eve. I wiped my hand on a towel. Okay. And we think it would be better if you didn't come this year. The kitchen went silent around me. The apple slice slipped from my fingers onto the counter. What? It's not meant to hurt you. That meant it was. Mom, what are you talking about? You've been in a very negative place lately. Understandably, perhaps, but still. You lost your job. You don't seem to have a clear plan. You've been withdrawn and sensitive. Christmas Eve is important to everyone, and we want a peaceful night. I waited for her to laugh, to say she was joking, to soften. She did not. You're uninviting me from Christmas? Don't use dramatic words. What word would you prefer? We are asking you to take this year to focus on yourself. By being alone on Christmas Eve, you have made choices, Grace. There it was again. That invisible ledger where my family recorded every way I had failed to become what they wanted. What choices? You left Daniel. You insisted on prioritizing work. Now the work is gone. You refuse practical help. You get defensive whenever anyone suggests something reasonable. I grip the edge of the counter. Reasonable, like telling me to go back to a man who wanted to control me? Grace. Reasonable, like offering me an entry-level job through Dad because apparently my entire career stopped counting the second I was laid off. You are proving my point. How? Your tone? My tone. Not her cruelty. Not her rejection. My tone. I laughed once quietly. Do Rebecca and Ethan know about this? A pause. That pause told me everything before she answered. We talked as a family. As a family, I repeated. Yes. Without me? This is exactly the energy we are trying to avoid. My hand started shaking around the phone. Then she said the sentence I would remember for the rest of my life. Failure clings to people, Grace. It spreads. We don't want that energy at the table. I stopped breathing, not because the words were loud. They were not. She said them gently, almost sadly, as if explaining a painful but necessary medical decision. Failure clings to people. It spreads. I thought of the ticket. I thought of the secure storage. I thought of the advisors, the taxes, the trusts, the impossible number that had rearranged my future. I thought of the list in my drawer: mortgage, retirement, college funds, debt relief. I had been preparing to rescue them. They were protecting themselves from me. Mom, I said softly, do you hear yourself? I know you're hurt. No? Do you hear what you just called me? I didn't call you anything. You said my failure spreads. I said the energy spreads. Oh, well, thank you for clarifying. Don't be sarcastic. This is why people are exhausted. People. Not her. Not the family. People. As if the world had gathered to vote on my presence and found it unpleasant. I could have told her then. I could have destroyed the conversation with one sentence. Actually, Mom, I won more money than all of you will ever see combined. I could have listened to her voice transform. I could have heard shock, apology, panic. I could have made her regret every word before the call ended. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. Because suddenly telling her, felt like handing a starving wolf the key to my front door. Okay, I said. She hesitated. Okay? I won't come. Relief. I heard it. Barely, but it was there. I think that's best. Anything else? I hope you use the time to reflect. I looked at the half-cut apple on the counter, browning at the edges. I will. She hung up first. For a long moment, I stood with the phone pressed to my ear, even though the call was over. Then I lowered it slowly. My apartment looked the same. The same narrow kitchen, the same mug by the sink, the same crooked cabinet door I had been meaning to fix. But something invisible had shifted so violently that I felt dizzy. I had not been excluded because I had done something cruel. I had been excluded because I had become inconvenient to their image of a perfect Christmas. No job, no husband, no cheerful success story to display, no seat. I did not cry. Not then. First, I needed to know whether my mother had lied about the family agreeing. I texted Ethan. Did you know Mom uninvited me from Christmas Eve? He replied in less than a minute. Yeah, we all talked about it. Sorry, but you've been really down lately. We just want a calm Christmas for the kids. I stared at the message. For the kids. People love using children as curtains to hide cowardice. I typed, you think I would ruin Christmas? He replied, not intentionally, but you bring a heavy mood. Maybe this will motivate you to get things together. I did not answer. I texted Rebecca next. Are you okay with me not coming to Christmas Eve? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally, her response came. Honestly? Yes. Mom is right. You've been difficult since the layoff, and everyone is walking on eggshells around you. Take the time to sort your life out. We can do something another day when you're in a better place. A better place. I looked at those words until they blurred. Then something inside of me cracked. Not the way I expected. I did not collapse to the floor sobbing. I laughed. It started as one sharp breath, then another, then suddenly I was laughing so hard I had to sit down at the kitchen table. Tears spilled down my face, but they were not only grief. They were disbelief, rage, release. The unbearable comedy of almost making millionaires out of people who thought I was too pathetic to sit near the mashed potatoes. I laughed until my stomach hurt. Then I cried until there was nothing elegant left in me. I cried for the woman I had been 3 days earlier, still making lists of ways to save them. I cried for the girl I had once been, bringing home good grades and waiting for praise that was always measured, always conditional. I cried for every dinner where I had swallowed insults to keep peace. I cried for how quickly they had made a family decision without me and called it love. When the tears finally stopped, the apartment was dark. I had never turned on the lights. My phone sat on the table with Rebecca's message still glowing. Take the time to sort your life out. So I did, not in the way she meant. The next morning, I called Richard. I need to change my plans, I said. He did not ask unnecessary questions. What happened? My family uninvited me from Christmas Eve. A short silence. I'm sorry. My mother said my failure spreads. This time, his silence was longer. When he spoke again, his voice was gentler. And had they known about the prize? No. Good. I closed my eyes. Good. Such a simple word, such a brutal truth. I was going to tell them at dinner, I said. I know. I was going to help everyone. I know. I feel stupid. You were hopeful. That is not the same thing. I pressed my palm against my forehead. What do I do now? Nothing immediately. Do not make promises. Do not confront them while you are hurt. Do something ordinary today. Eat, sleep, take a walk. Then we will continue building your plan. I don't want to be ordinary today. A small pause. Then do something safe and extraordinary. That sentence became permission. By noon, I was standing inside a luxury car dealership north of the city, wearing jeans, boots, and the same wool coat my mother had once said made me look tired. The salesman approached me with the cautious smile men use when they are not sure whether a woman can afford the room she has entered. Can I help you? Yes, I said. I want to buy an SUV. He glanced toward the window, maybe expecting someone else to join me. a husband, a father, a man with the wallet. Of course. Were you looking to lease or finance? Buy. His smile sharpened. Wonderful. Do you have a budget in mind? I looked at the row of vehicles gleaming under showroom lights. A year earlier, I would have been afraid to touch one. A month earlier, my father had told me to walk more to save gas. No strict budget, I said. I want something safe, beautiful, and available today. His posture changed so fast it almost made me laugh. 2 hours later, I drove out in a black luxury SUV with heated leather seats, a quiet engine, and a dashboard that looked more complicated than my old office software. I paid in full through the proper account Richard had arranged for accessible funds. Not the whole fortune, not even a meaningful fraction of it, but enough to feel the first clean break from the life where everyone had mistaken my restraint for helplessness. When I pulled onto the road, I expected guilt. Instead, I felt light, not because of the car itself. A car is a car, no matter how soft the seats are. It was the absence of apology that stunned me. I did not have to explain. I did not have to justify. I did not have to ask anyone whether I deserved it. I drove along Lakeshore Drive as afternoon light spread over the water like silver. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt my shoulders drop. That feeling lasted until Rebecca called. I ignored it. She called again, then texted. Mom said someone saw you at a dealership. Did you buy a new car? I almost threw the phone onto the passenger seat. Of course someone had seen me. The city was huge until gossip needed to travel. I waited 10 minutes before replying. Yes. Her response came immediately. Grace, please tell me you didn't use your savings on a car. I smiled. A real smile this time, small and cold. I had a way to pay for it. She called again. This time I answered through the car speaker. What? No greeting, no softness. How much did you spend? She demanded. Hello to you too. Grace, this isn't funny. Mom is worried sick. Is she? Yes. You lose your job, you refuse help, you get yourself uninvited from Christmas because of your attitude, and now you're buying some ridiculous car? I didn't get myself uninvited. You know what I mean. I really don't, she huffed. What did it cost? That's not your business. It becomes our business if you're spiraling. There it was. They had found the news story already. I was not simply unemployed anymore. I was spiraling, reckless, unstable. A problem that justified interference. I'm not spiraling. Then explain the car. No. The silence on her end snapped tight. No? No. You're spending your last savings on a luxury car to prove some kind of point. What happens when rent is due? What happens when you can't find work? Are you gonna live in that thing? I watched traffic move ahead, red taillights glowing in the winter afternoon. Maybe it has good trunk space. This is serious. So was uninviting me from Christmas. She groaned. Are you still on that? Grace, Mom was trying to protect the holiday. From me. From your negativity? My failure energy, you mean. She shouldn't have phrased it that way. But she meant it. Rebecca said nothing. That silence told the truth more clearly than any apology could have. I have to go, I said. You need help. No, Rebecca. I needed family. There's a difference. I ended the call. She texted 3 more times before evening. I did not read them. Christmas Eve arrived cold and bright. For most of the day, I expected to break. I kept waiting for the loneliness to swallow me, for the old training to send me crawling back with an apology I did not owe. I imagined my family gathering at my parents' house, my mother checking the oven, my father opening wine, Rebecca arranging dessert on a platter, Ethan's children shouting near the tree, the empty place where I might have sat, though perhaps they had removed the chair entirely this time. I wondered whether anyone would mention me. I wondered whether my absence would feel like victory to them or relief. Then I stopped wondering. At 5 o'clock, I showered, did my hair, and put on a deep green dress I had bought that afternoon from a boutique where the saleswoman called me beautiful, with no knowledge of whether I was employed, married, respectable, or welcome anywhere for Christmas. I wore earrings I had purchased because I liked them, not because they were practical, not because they were on sale, not because Rebecca approved, because I liked them. Then I drove my new SUV to a five-star hotel downtown and walked into a restaurant glowing with candlelight, polished glass, and the low hum of people who knew how to spend money without apologizing. The hostess smiled. Reservation? Yes. Grace Miller, table for one. If she found that sad, she was too well trained to show it. She led me to a small table near the window, overlooking a street lined with Christmas lights. Couples sat around me. Families, too. A group of older women wearing glittering scarves raised champagne glasses in the corner. Somewhere, a piano played a soft version of Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. For a moment, my throat tightened. Table for one. The phrase had weight. But then, I sat down. No one avoided the chair beside me. No one sighed at my choices. No one measured my worth by my job title. No one told me to call Daniel. A waiter approached with a menu. Good evening, Ms. Miller. Good evening. Not, what are you going to do with your life? Not you bring everyone down. Not failure spreads. Just good evening. I ordered without checking prices. Lobster bisque, filet mignon, a glass of excellent red wine. Chocolate souffle because I wanted it, and because no one was there to say dessert was too much. Halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed. My mother. I stared at the screen until it stopped. A voicemail appeared. Then a text. Merry Christmas Eve. Hope you're using tonight to think. I set the phone face down. A few minutes later, Ethan posted a photo in the family group chat. My parents' dining room, candles, plates, smiling faces, Rebecca's children in matching sweaters, Ethan's kids holding cookies, my mother standing behind the table like a queen in her little kingdom. There were no empty chairs visible. Of course not. My absence had made the photo cleaner. Rebecca added, perfect Christmas Eve with the people who bring peace. For 1 second, the old pain rose so sharply that I almost could not swallow. Then, the waiter placed my steak in front of me and asked if everything looked good. I looked at the plate, the candle, the wine, the window, my own reflection in the glass. A woman alone, a woman unwanted at one table and completely safe at another. Yes, I said, everything looks perfect. The bill came to more than $300. I tipped generously. As I signed the receipt, I thought about the list in my drawer. The mortgage, the retirement accounts, the college funds, all the ways I had planned to pour my miracle into people who had mistaken my pain for contamination. That list was not dead yet, but it was changing. I did not know exactly what I would do with the money. I did not yet know about the house, the move, the foundation, the man I would eventually marry, or the life waiting for me far from my family's reach. I only knew one thing with absolute clarity as I stepped out of the hotel into the cold Christmas night. I would never again beg for a seat at a table where people felt relieved when I was gone. After Christmas Eve, something inside me became very quiet. Not peaceful, not yet. Peace is soft. What settled over me was harder than peace. It was a kind of silence that came after a door locked from the inside. I still woke up some mornings with a strange ache in my chest, still reached for my phone sometimes before remembering there was no one I wanted to call. But beneath the grief, beneath the humiliation, there was a new steadiness. My family had not rejected me in a moment of anger. They had discussed it. They had agreed. They had removed me from Christmas Eve like people removing spoiled food from a refrigerator, then taken smiling pictures around the table and called it peace. There was no misunderstanding left to solve. That clarity changed everything. For the next 2 weeks, I followed Richard's instructions exactly. I did not confront anyone. I did not post anything. I did not answer Rebecca's long messages about my impulsive car purchase. I did not respond when my mother sent me a link to a church support group for unemployed women with the text, "Healing begins with humility." I screenshotted it, sent it to Richard without comment, and then deleted the message. Richard replied, "Document everything. Respond to nothing emotional." That became my rule. Document everything. Respond to nothing emotional. At first, it felt cold, almost inhuman. My entire life, I had been trained to explain myself. If my mother misunderstood me, I explained. If Rebecca judged me, I defended. If Ethan mocked me, I argued. If my father spoke to me like disappointment was a form of guidance, I tried to prove I had a plan. Now, for the first time, I let their words hang in the air without catching them. Silence, I discovered, can be a weapon, but it can also be shelter. By early January, the money was fully real. Not just a ticket, not just legal paperwork, not just numbers discussed in conference rooms by calm professionals. Real, claimed, processed, structured, protected. After taxes, trusts, investment accounts, reserves, and long-term safeguards, the amount still looked impossible. I remember sitting in Richard's office while he explained the final structure, and I kept staring at the summary page as if one more glance would make it smaller. It did not. "You are secure," Richard said. The word hit me harder than rich. Rich sounded loud, flashy, dangerous. Secure sounded like sleeping through the night. I went home that afternoon and stood in my apartment for a long time. The place had been good to me in its way. Its old floors, narrow hallway, stubborn radiator, and tiny kitchen had held me through overwork, heartbreak, unemployment, and the morning that rearranged my future. But suddenly the walls felt like the inside of a box I had outgrown. I did not want extravagance. That was what I told myself when I called a real estate agent. "I'm looking for a house," I said. "What kind of house?" I looked around the apartment, at the chipped kitchen counter, the stack of unopened mail, the plant by the window that had somehow survived my worst months. "A private one," I said. "Beautiful, but not showy. Safe, quiet. I want space, light. I want discretion." The agent's name was Caroline Grant. She had the polished confidence of a woman who sold homes to people who did not need mortgages. She did not ask unnecessary questions when I told her there was no strict budget. She only said, "Then we should be selective." For 2 weeks, Caroline showed me houses and neighborhoods I had only driven through slowly before, wondering what kind of people lived behind those gates and hedges. Lincoln Park mansions with glass walls and rooftop decks. Historic homes in the Gold Coast with staircases carved like art. A modern property near the lake that looked like a museum and felt just as warm. They were beautiful. None of them felt like mine. Then Caroline took me north, beyond the busier parts of the city, to a home set back from the street behind iron gates and old trees. The house was stone and pale brick, elegant without screaming for attention. Tall windows reflected the winter sky. A curved driveway led to a front entrance framed by bare branches and soft outdoor lights. There was a garden asleep under snow, a pool covered for the season, and enough distance from the neighbors that no one could watch me through a kitchen window. I stepped out of the SUV and knew before we reached the door. "This one," something inside me said. Caroline unlocked it and led me in. The foyer opened into a space filled with light. High ceilings, warm wood floors, a fireplace large enough to look like it belonged in another century. The living room stretched toward the windows overlooking the backyard, where snow rested on stone paths and dormant rose bushes. There was a library with built-in shelves, a kitchen big enough for people who actually enjoyed cooking, and a bedroom suite with windows facing the trees. It was not just expensive, it was still. That was what made me want it. Stillness. A house where no one had ever left empty chairs beside me. A house where my mother's sigh did not live in the walls. A house where my future would not have to apologize for being larger than my past. "How much?" I asked. Caroline named a number just over $4 million. A month earlier, hearing that price would have made me laugh at the absurdity. Now I only looked out at the garden and said, "I want to make an offer." Caroline's eyebrows lifted, but only slightly. She was too professional to show surprise for long. "We can prepare one. There will be inspections, legal review, proof of funds." Do it, I said. I want it. The process was not instant. Expensive things rarely are, no matter what people imagine. There were attorneys, title checks, inspections, insurance consultations, security assessments, tax planning, and more documents than I had signed during my entire working life. Richard reviewed everything. Caroline negotiated. I waited. My family knew none of it. As far as they were concerned, I was probably still in my apartment, unemployed, sulking, and dangerously close to needing the kind of help they would offer only with a sermon attached. My mother texted once in January, "Are you ready to stop being angry?" I did not answer. Rebecca texted, "The kids asked why you weren't at Christmas." I didn't know what to tell them. I wanted to reply, "Tell them the truth. Tell them adults can be cruel and still call themselves peaceful." Instead, I wrote nothing. Ethan sent a single message. "Hope you're figuring things out." I deleted it. By late February, the house was mine. Mine. I stood in the empty living room after closing, holding the keys in my palm. The sellers had moved out completely. My footsteps echoed. Outside, bare branches scratched lightly against the pale sky. The fireplace was cold. The room smelled faintly of fresh paint, lemon cleaner, and possibility. For the first time, I owned a place no one in my family had ever touched. No one had opinions on the curtains. No one had helped choose the furniture, then used that help as a debt. No one could say I was lucky they allowed me to stay. No one could stand in the doorway and remind me that I had failed. I walked from room to room slowly. In the kitchen, I opened cabinets because I could. In the library, I ran my fingers along empty shelves and imagined filling them with books I had never had time to read. In the primary bedroom, I stood before the windows and looked out at the backyard where the snow had begun to melt in thin silver lines. I whispered, "Mine." The word sounded unfamiliar. Then I said it again, "Mine." Furnishing the house took almost another month. I hired a designer named Evelyn who listened when I said I did not want a magazine spread. I wanted warmth, soft furniture, deep chairs, lamps that made rooms glow instead of shine. A dining table big enough for guests, but not so large it looked like a stage. "Do you entertain often?" Evelyn asked. I almost said no. Then I realized I did not know. Maybe one day I would. Maybe one day people would sit at my table because they wanted to be there. Maybe laughter would live in the room without anyone performing. Maybe children would run through the halls without being used as excuses. Maybe I would host dinners where no one measured who deserved which chair. "Not yet," I said, "but I'd like to." I moved in on a cold morning in early March. The movers arrived before sunrise. My old apartment emptied faster than I expected. Boxes, furniture, clothes, dishes, books, everything carried out and loaded into a truck by men who had no idea that the woman watching them had recently been treated like a family embarrassment. When the last box was gone, I stood in the bare apartment and felt less sadness than I expected. It had been a shelter, but shelters are not meant to be permanent homes. I left the keys with the building manager and drove away in my new SUV without looking back. For one glorious week, no one found me. I learned the sounds of the house, the soft hum of the heating system, the way wind moved through the trees at night, the quiet click of security lights turning on outside. I drank coffee in the kitchen with morning sun across the floor. I ordered groceries without checking prices. I slept in a bed so comfortable it felt almost immoral. Most importantly, I did not hear my phone buzzing with family messages. For the first time in my adult life, I experienced privacy not as loneliness, but as luxury. Then my old landlord called. His name was Mr. Feldman. He was kind in a distracted way, always wearing sweaters with loose threads and forgetting whether he had already fixed something. I nearly did not answer, assuming there was some issue with the security deposit. "Grace," he said, "sorry to bother you. Your sister stopped by." My body went cold. "My sister?" "Yes. Rebecca, I think. She came looking for you. She seemed surprised when I told her you had moved out." She asked where you went. What did you tell her? Nothing. I don't have your new address anyway. She was very insistent, though. I closed my eyes. Of course she was. Thank you for letting me know. Everything okay? Yes, I lied. Family stuff. After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen of my beautiful new house and felt the old life pressing its face against the glass. Rebecca had gone to my apartment. Not called, not asked, gone. That meant curiosity had become suspicion. I should have known the car would not be enough for them to dismiss. In their story, I was unemployed and reckless. A luxury SUV could be explained as a breakdown, a desperate attempt to prove something, a foolish lease, a financial mistake. But moving out without needing help? That did not fit. 2 days later, my mother called 5 times. I watched her name appear and disappear on the screen. Margaret Miller, Margaret Miller, Margaret Miller. Each call felt less like concern and more like knocking. Finally, on the 5th call, I answered. Where are you? She demanded. No, hello. No, how are you? No, I'm sorry about Christmas. Only location. I moved, I said. I know you moved. Rebecca went to your apartment and strangers were living there. She had no right to go there. She was worried. No, she was curious. My mother ignored that. Where are you staying? I have a place. What kind of place? A safe one. Grace, this is not the time to be cute. If you got evicted, you need to be honest. I almost laughed. I didn't get evicted. Then why move without telling your family? Because my family uninvited me from Christmas and said my failure was contagious. A sharp breath. You are still twisting that. I'm repeating it. I said the energy was bad, and clearly I was right because look how you're behaving. There it was again. The impossible circle. They hurt me, I reacted, and my reaction became proof that they had been right to hurt me. I'm not in the street, I said. I don't need a shelter. I don't need Daniel. I don't need you to send me dish soap tips. I have somewhere to live. Her voice lowered. Are you with a man? For a moment, I genuinely did not understand. What? Is that how you're paying for all this? The insult landed slowly, not like a slap. Like poison entering the bloodstream. Goodbye, Mom. Grace. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear this time, from anger. I had money beyond anything she could imagine, and the only explanation she could reach for was that a man must be funding me. Even in success, I could not be the source of my own life. That afternoon, I called Richard. They're looking for me, I said. Have they found your address? Not yet. Then we tightened privacy immediately. We changed mailing structures. We reviewed property records. We added more security, cameras, gate access, a service that monitored unwanted visits. Richard reminded me not to underestimate entitlement wrapped in family language. They may believe they have a right to know, he said. They don't. No, but belief makes people bold. He was right. 2 weeks later, the doorbell rang. I was in the library unpacking books when the chime sounded through the house. I checked the security camera on my phone and froze. Rebecca stood at my gate. She wore a camel-colored coat, dark sunglasses pushed onto her head, and the expression of someone who had expected an apartment building and found a mansion. Her mouth was slightly open. She looked from the gate to the house, then down at her phone, then back again. For several seconds, I did nothing. I should not have opened the door. I know that now, but a part of me still wanted to see what she would do. A part of me wanted to know whether, faced with evidence that I was not ruined, she might feel shame, maybe even relief. Maybe she would say, Grace, thank God you're okay. So I opened the gate remotely and met her at the front door. How did you get my address? I asked before she could speak. Her eyes were still moving over the front of the house. The stone, the windows, the landscaping, the expensive quiet. Are you going to invite me in? No, answer the question. She removed her sunglasses slowly. Mark has a friend who works with public records and security databases. My stomach tightened. That is illegal. Don't be dramatic. You accessed my private information without permission. You disappeared. I moved. You cut us off. You uninvited me from Christmas. Her mouth hardened. Are you going to keep using that forever? I don't know. Are you going to keep pretending it wasn't cruel? She looked past me into the foyer. Curiosity beat anger in her face. What is this place? My home. Your home, she repeated. Yes? How? The word was small, barely a whisper. Not congratulations. Not, I'm glad you're safe. How? As if my stability was an accusation. I bought it. Her eyes snapped back to mine. With what money? My money. She laughed once, but it cracked in the middle. Grace, don't play games. This house is worth millions. I know. For the first time, real fear moved across her face. Not fear for me? Fear of not knowing something she should have known. Fear that the family story had been wrong. Fear that I had stepped outside the role they had assigned me. She pushed past me into the house. Rebecca. She did not stop. She walked into the foyer, then the living room, looking around as if the walls might confess before I did. Her face drained of color. She touched the back of a sofa, looked at the fireplace, the art, the tall windows. What did you do? I closed the door behind us slowly. Excuse me? What did you do, Grace? Her voice dropped lower. Did you steal something? The question should have shocked me. It did not. That was the saddest part. My own sister stood in my home, surrounded by proof that I was safe. And the only explanation she could imagine was crime. I walked to the console table near the stairs, opened the drawer, and took out a printed copy of the lottery confirmation article Richard had allowed me to keep for personal records. My name was not public in the way gossip wanted it to be, but the claim documentation and internal proof were enough. I also had a photograph of the ticket taken before it was secured. I held out my phone. Rebecca stared at the image, the numbers, the date, the prize. Her face changed 3 times in less than 10 seconds. Confusion, recognition, calculation. She looked at me, then at the phone, then back at the house. You won? Yes. How much? Enough. How much? More than 500 million before taxes. She stepped back as if I had shoved her. For one brief, fragile second, I thought she might cry. I thought the enormity of it might wash away whatever ugly thing had been living between us. I thought she might grab my hands and say, Grace, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We treated you terribly. Instead, her mouth tightened. When? December. Her eyes sharpened. Before Christmas. The words were not spoken, but I saw them arrive. Before the dinner, before the uninvitation, before she sent that message telling me to sort my life out. Rebecca understood the timeline. I watched understanding enter her like a blade. You knew on Christmas Eve, she said. Yes. And you didn't tell us. You told me not to come. Her face flushed. That was different. Was it? We thought you were falling apart. You thought I was embarrassing. We were worried about your attitude. My attitude was unemployment. Yours was cruelty. She flinched, but anger saved her from shame. So what? This is revenge? You bought a mansion and hid it from us to punish everyone? No. I bought a house because I needed a home. And you weren't going to tell us? I was going to tell you on Christmas Eve. That silenced her. For the first time since entering my house, Rebecca had no immediate answer. I let the silence sit. I had a list, I said. Do you know that? I had written down how I wanted to help everyone. Mom and Dad's retirement, your mortgage, Ethan's kids' college funds. I had plans for all of you. Her lips parted. There it was. Not sorrow, not shame, interest. What list? I almost smiled. That's what you heard? Grace. No. She looked around again, but differently now. The house was no longer evidence. It was inventory. You need to talk to Mom and Dad. I don't need to do anything. This is family money. The words came out before she could dress them properly. I stared at her. She realized her mistake immediately, but it was too late. Family money, I repeated. I mean, something this big affects everyone. No, it affects me. You can't just sit on that kind of money while people you love struggle. People I love, we're your family. You were my family when you voted me out of Christmas, too. Her eyes filled then, but the tears arrived too late and too conveniently. We made a mistake. I waited. She looked at me. I waited longer. No apology came, just the shape of one, empty inside. I think you should leave, I said. Grace, don't do this. Leave! Her face hardened again, the tears vanishing like a trick she had decided not to perform. You know Mom is going to find out. I assumed you'd tell her before you reached the driveway. She grabbed her purse. You've changed. I opened the front door. No, Rebecca. I think money just made it harder for you to pretend you knew me. She left without saying goodbye. The next morning, my phone began ringing at 7:12. Mother, father, Rebecca, Ethan, mother again. Then group messages. Then voicemails? I let them pile up until noon, then listened with Richard's assistant present on speaker as documentation. My mother's first voicemail was breathless. Grace! Rebecca told us something unbelievable. Call me immediately. We need to discuss this as a family. My father's voice was stern. You should have come to us. Money like this requires guidance. Call me. Ethan sounded excited and offended at the same time. Grace, what the hell? You win the lottery and no one knows? We need to talk. This could change things for the kids. Rebecca's message was cold. I told them, you can be mad, but this isn't something you hide from your family. By late afternoon, I agreed to one meeting. Not because I owed them one, because I wanted to see them with the masks off. Sunday afternoon, they arrived together. My parents in my father's sedan. Rebecca and Mark in their SUV. Ethan and Lauren in another car. They stood near the front entrance, staring at the house the way people stare at a celebrity they dislike but cannot look away from. I watched them through the camera before opening the door. My mother's face was pale and tight. My father looked angry, which was his preferred expression when he felt uncertain. Rebecca avoided the camera. Ethan kept glancing at the upper windows, probably calculating square footage. I let them in. No hugs. No greetings warm enough to mistake for love. They entered my living room and sat carefully on furniture they clearly knew was expensive. My mother looked around with wet eyes, but I could not tell whether she was emotional because her daughter was safe or because the curtains alone probably cost more than her dining room set. I sat across from them. No one spoke at first, so I did. Yes, I said. I won the lottery in December. The prize was more than $500 million before taxes. Most of it has been placed into investments, trusts, protected accounts, and long-term structures. I have legal and financial advisors. I am safe, stable, and not asking anyone for help. The silence that followed was thick. I watched the number move through them. My mother brought a hand to her chest. My father blinked several times. Ethan whispered something under his breath. Lauren's eyes widened. Rebecca looked down at her lap. No one said congratulations. Not one person. My mother recovered first. Grace, she said softly, family is the most important thing. I almost laughed. It was always amazing how quickly people reached for family after abandoning kindness. We have always loved you, she continued, even when you misunderstood us. Misunderstood? She pressed her lips together. Christmas was handled poorly, but we were worried. You told me failure spreads. My father shifted. Your mother used the wrong words. Did she mean the wrong thing? He looked away. Ethan leaned forward, impatient. Look, we can go in circles about who said what, but that doesn't help anybody. I'm not asking for myself. I'm thinking about the kids. Of course you are. His jaw tightened. College is expensive. You know that. One decision from you could set them up for life. Rebecca looked up then, encouraged. Our mortgage has been suffocating us, she said. I wasn't going to say anything, but since we're being honest, Mark and I have been under pressure for years. You could help without even feeling it. My mother nodded through tears. And your father and I are getting older. My father cleared his throat. We shouldn't have to ask. You know what is right. There it was. The demand beneath the performance. They had walked into my home without congratulations, without apology, without asking how I was handling the shock of sudden wealth, without wondering whether I was scared or overwhelmed or lonely. They did not ask what I needed. They did not ask whether I was happy. They saw a fortune and immediately began assigning it jobs. Mortgage, college, retirement, relief. The same people who had decided I would poison Christmas dinner with my failure were now explaining what my success owed them. I folded my hands in my lap. "I'll think about it," I said. They all looked relieved too quickly, too visibly. "But for now," I continued, "I want you to leave." My mother blinked. "What?" I said, "I'll think about it, and now I want you to leave." "Grace," Rebecca said. "No." Ethan stood halfway. "Are you serious?" "Yes." My father's face darkened. "You invite us here to humiliate us?" "I invited you here to hear what you would say." I heard it. My mother began to cry properly then. "We are your family." "You keep saying that like it explains why you deserve everything and excuses how you treated me. You are being cruel." That word from her mouth was almost impressive. Cruel. I stood. The meeting was over. One by one, they rose. Offended, confused, angry that the script had not ended with me writing checks. At the door, my mother turned back. "You will help us," she said, not pleading now, commanding. "When you calm down, you'll remember who raised you." I looked at her for a long moment. I remember everything. After they left, I locked the door and stood in the foyer until their cars disappeared down the driveway. Then I went to the drawer in my library where I had placed the old handwritten list. Mom and Dad. Mortgage, retirement, medical care. Rebecca, mortgage, kids' college. Ethan, kids' college, savings. I unfolded it carefully. The handwriting looked like it belonged to a different woman. A woman still hoping to buy love from people who had charged her for it all her life. I did not tear the list up. Not yet. Instead, I sat at my desk and opened the family group chat. For one final test, I typed, "I've been thinking about donating most of the money to a foundation." My phone rang in less than 30 seconds. My father, then my mother, then Ethan, then Rebecca. Messages exploded across the screen. "Are you insane? You can't give family money to strangers. Call us now. You need guidance. This is irresponsible. We should talk to a lawyer." A video call request appeared in the family chat. I accepted. Their faces filled the screen in little squares, all tense, all furious, all frightened in the same specific way. Not frightened for me, frightened of losing access. My father spoke first. "Have you lost your mind?" My mother leaned toward the camera. "Grace, listen to me. You are not thinking clearly." Ethan's voice came from somewhere off screen. "Can someone intervene legally if she's making irrational decisions?" Rebecca said, "You need to stop punishing us." I looked at them, really looked. At the people I had almost saved. At the people who believed generosity towards strangers was insanity, but entitlement from them was morality. At the people who called themselves family only when there was something to gain. Then I said calmly, "I'm not giving any of you a single dollar." All of them started talking at once. I did not listen. I ended the call. Then, one by one, I blocked their numbers. My mother, my father, Rebecca, Ethan. For a few minutes, the house was so silent I could hear my own breathing. I expected guilt to come. It did not. What came instead was grief. Yes, but clean grief. The kind that hurts because something is over, not because you are still trapped inside it. That night, I slept in my beautiful, quiet house with every door locked and every light turned off except one lamp in the hallway. For the first time in months, I did not dream of empty chairs. Blocking my family did not make them disappear. For 2 days, the silence felt like freedom. My phone no longer lit up with my mother's name. No more calls from my father disguised as authority. No more messages from Rebecca dripping with wounded entitlement. No more Ethan demanding that I think about his children as if I had personally enrolled them in expensive futures he could not afford. The quiet in my house became almost holy. I woke up without dread. I drank coffee in the kitchen while snow melted from the branches outside. I walked barefoot across heated floors and reminded myself, again and again, that no one had the right to enter my life just because they had once occupied it. Then, on the third morning, my parents came to the gate. I saw them on the security camera before the doorbell rang. My mother stood wrapped in a long gray coat, her hair carefully styled, her face arranged into tragedy. My father paced behind her, hands shoved into his coat pockets, jaw tight. He looked less like a worried parent and more like a man who had arrived at a bank after being denied access to his own account. The doorbell rang. I stood in the upstairs hallway watching them through the camera feed on my phone. My mother pressed this button again, then again. "Grace!" she called, her voice carrying through the speaker. "Grace, open the door! This is ridiculous!" My father leaned toward the gate. "We can see your car. We know you're home." I said nothing. My mother looked up toward the second-floor windows as if she could feel me watching. "You cannot treat your own parents like criminals," she shouted. That almost made me laugh, because only a week earlier, my sister had used her husband's connection to find my private address. Only days earlier, my father had discussed whether someone could legally intervene before I donated family money to strangers. Only my family could stand outside the gates of a house I owned and accuse me of cruelty for not opening the door to people who had already proven they wanted access, not reconciliation. They stayed for 20 minutes. My mother cried near the intercom. My father tried anger, then command, then silence. At one point, he pressed the bell and said, "Grace, enough. We are not leaving until you speak to us." But eventually, they did leave. Everyone leaves when they realize there is no audience. I saved the security footage and sent it to Richard. He called 10 minutes later. "They came in person?" "Yes." "Did you speak to them?" "No." "Good. If they return, do not engage. Document each visit." I thought blocking them would be enough. It rarely is when people believe they are owed something. I looked out the window at the empty driveway. What do I do if they keep coming? We escalate legally if necessary, but we should also discuss whether this address is still safe for you emotionally. Emotionally, the word embarrassed me at first. I had been thinking in terms of gates, locks, cameras, and legal boundaries. Richard was asking about something harder to secure, the feeling of being hunted in my own home. "I just bought this house," I said. "I know. I love this house." "I know that too. So, why does it already feel like they've touched it?" Richard did not answer immediately. Then he said, "Because they have." The next day, Ethan came with Lauren. He did not cry at the gate. He performed exhaustion. He stood with one hand on his hip and the other pressed against his forehead, as if I were the unreasonable client in a business negotiation. "Grace," he said through the intercom, "I know you can hear me. This is not how adults handle things." I watched from the library. Lauren stood slightly behind him, arms folded, looking uncomfortable but not enough to leave. "You are punishing innocent children," Ethan continued. "I hope you understand that. My kids love you. They don't understand why their aunt suddenly hates them." My fingers tightened around the phone. There it was. The children again. My weakness, or what he thought would be my weakness. For a second, I saw Lily at Sunday dinner, running to me with her crayon drawing before being called away. I did love those children. They had done nothing wrong. That was the cruelty of it. Ethan knew exactly where to press. He leaned closer to the camera. "You can ignore me, but you need to think about what kind of person refuses to help her own niece and nephew when she has more money than she could ever spend." I wanted to press the speaker button and say, "The kind of person who refuses to let you use children as hostages." I did not. Document everything. Respond to nothing emotional. Ethan stayed for 15 minutes, then left a folded note wedged into the gate. My security service retrieved it later and scanned it before sending me a photo. It was 4 pages long, not an apology. A proposal. He had calculated tuition costs for 2 children through private high school and college. He included inflation estimates, room and board, reasonable family support, and a paragraph explaining that if I funded the children properly, he and Lauren would not ask me for personal money for at least 5 years. At least 5 years. I laughed so hard, I had to sit down. Then I cried, because beneath the absurdity was something uglier. He had not written one sentence about missing me. Rebecca came the following afternoon. She brought Mark, her husband, the same man whose connections had helped her violate my privacy. He stood beside her at the gate, looking like he wanted the pavement to open and swallow him. Rebecca did not look ashamed. "Grace," she said, "I'm not here to fight." That was how Rebecca always began fights. "I want to apologize," she continued. I went very still. For one dangerous second, I leaned toward the screen. Then she added, "But you need to understand how hurtful this has been for all of us." I leaned back. There it was, Rebecca's version of apology. A narrow hallway that always led back to her pain. "We were shocked," she said. "Anyone would have reacted badly. You can't drop something like this on a family and expect people to be perfect." I stared at the screen. I had not dropped anything on them. She had invaded my home, accused me of theft, learned my secret, and carried it to everyone else before I had time to breathe. Mark murmured something to her. She snapped, "I'm handling it." Then she turned back to the camera. "You have to stop hiding behind the gate. We are your family. We need to sit down with an attorney and create a fair plan." A fair plan. For my money, my life, my miracle, my survival. The anger that moved through me then was so calm it almost frightened me. Not hot, not explosive. Cold, clear. I saved the footage. That evening, Richard helped me send a formal written notice through an attorney. They were not permitted to come to my property, contact my security service, access my private information, or attempt to reach me through third parties. Further harassment would be documented and handled legally. For 48 hours, they stayed away. Then my mother mailed a letter. No return address. But I knew her handwriting instantly. Beautiful, careful, dramatic. The kind of handwriting that looked like it belonged on sympathy cards. Richard told me I did not have to read it. I read it anyway. "My dearest Grace, a mother's love never ends, even when her child turns away." I stopped there and laughed once. Then I kept reading. She wrote 3 pages about sacrifice, about sleepless nights when I was a baby, about school uniforms and doctor appointments and birthdays she had planned. She wrote that no mother was perfect, but children should remember who gave them life. She said money had changed me, that pride was poisoning my heart, that I was confusing independence with cruelty. Near the end, she wrote, "We forgive you. Come home before this becomes something you cannot repair. We forgive you." I placed the letter on the kitchen counter and looked at those 3 words for a long time. She had uninvited me from Christmas. She had called my failure contagious. She had implied I must be kept away from the family table for everyone else's protection. She had arrived at my gate demanding access after learning I was rich. And now she forgave me. That was the night I understood I had to leave Chicago. Not because I was afraid they would break in. The security was strong. The law was on my side. Richard was prepared. But I did not want a life that required me to check cameras before drinking coffee. I did not want my home to become a place where every chime of the gate sent adrenaline through my body. I did not want to live in a mansion that had become a battlefield before I had even hosted one dinner. They knew where I lived. That was enough. The next morning, I called Richard. "I want to move." He did not sound surprised. "Where?" "Far enough that they can't drive over whenever they feel entitled." "Do you have a city in mind?" I looked out at the garden. Still beautiful, still mine, and already no longer safe in the way I needed. "Denver," I said. I had been there twice for work years earlier. I remembered the mountains on the horizon, the dry air, the sense of space. It was a real city, big enough for anonymity, far enough from Chicago that my family could not appear at my gate between errands. It had business communities, nonprofits, art, restaurants, and neighborhoods where a woman with wealth could live quietly if she paid the right professionals to protect her privacy. Richard approved. Within a week, he connected me with a Denver-based real estate advisor named Olivia Bennett, who specialized in private purchases. I need security and discretion, I told her. Comfort more than status. I do not want a house that appears in magazines. I want a home. Olivia found one faster than I expected. It was smaller than the Chicago house, though still more beautiful than anything I had imagined owning before the lottery. It sat in a quiet, gated community outside the busiest part of the city, with mountain views, warm stone, tall pines, and a private garden sheltered by walls and trees. There was a study, a large kitchen, guest rooms, and a terrace where the evening light turned the sky rose and gold. The first time Olivia showed it to me over a private video tour, I felt my body relax. Not excitement. Relief. This one, I said. Richard's team handled the purchase through protected structures that kept my personal address from becoming easy gossip. The Chicago house was listed through a separate firm with strict privacy instructions. I would not attend showings. I would not speak to curious buyers. I would not leave traces for my family to follow. Packing took less emotion the second time. I had not lived in this house long enough to attach memories to every corner. Still, on the final morning, before the movers arrived, I walked through each room and said goodbye. Not to the walls exactly, but to the version of myself who had believed buying a beautiful house in Chicago would be enough distance from pain. Sometimes freedom requires more than a locked gate. Sometimes it requires a map. I left before dawn. The city was still dark, the streets shining faintly from overnight rain. My belongings were already on their way under professional supervision. I drove the SUV myself because I wanted the road. I wanted the physical act of putting miles between me and everyone who thought love meant ownership. The drive west felt endless and cleansing. Illinois flattened behind me. Iowa opened wide. Nebraska stretched under an enormous sky. I stopped at hotels under another name arranged for travel privacy. I ate alone in roadside restaurants and slept better than I expected. By the time the mountains appeared in the distance, faint blue shapes against the horizon, something inside me loosened. Denver did not know me. No one there remembered me being fired. No one had seen the empty chairs. No one knew my mother's voice or Rebecca's tone or Ethan's calculations. For the first time in my life, anonymity felt like grace. My new house welcomed me with quiet. The first night, I sat on the terrace wrapped in a blanket, staring at the mountains while the air cooled around me. I had no family group chat, no social media, a new phone number, a new address, new attorneys, new routines. Richard had helped close every door that could be closed. Except one, my Aunt Clara. She was my mother's younger sister and had always been different from the rest of them. She lived in Portland, far from family politics, in a small house full of books, plants, and wind chimes. When I was a child, she was the only adult who listened without correcting me every 2 minutes. She remembered what I liked. She asked questions and waited for real answers. She had never told me I was too much. I called her from my new number on my third night in Denver. "Hello?" She answered cautiously. "Aunt Clara, it's me. Grace." There was a sharp inhale. "Grace?" "Yes?" "Oh, honey." Her voice softened instantly. "Are you safe?" The question nearly undid me. Not, "Where are you?" Not, "Why didn't you call your mother?" Not, "What have you done?" "Are you safe?" "Yes," I said. And for the first time in months, the word felt true. "I'm safe." I told her everything. Not all at once. Slowly. The job. The way the family treated me afterward. The lottery. Christmas Eve. The car, the house, Rebecca finding me, the demands, the visits, the move. Aunt Clara listened without interrupting. When I finally finished, the line was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Good." I blinked. "Good?" "Good that you left." Tears sprang to my eyes so quickly I covered my mouth. "They made you feel guilty for surviving," she said. "That is not family. That is control wearing family's coat." I laughed through tears. "You sound so sure." "I am sure. Your mother has always needed someone beneath her to feel steady. For years, I worried it was you. I had never heard anyone say it that plainly. Can you keep my number private? I asked. I want you in my life, but I don't want them to find me. Your secret is safe with me. She'll ask. I know. She'll pressure you. She can try. That was how Aunt Clara became the only blood relative I kept. Everyone else became silence. With distance finally around me, I began asking the question I had avoided since the money arrived. What now? I had spent months reacting. To the firing, to my family, to the ticket, to the lawyers, to the house, to the harassment. My life had become a series of exits, but money was not a life. Security was not purpose, and I did not want to become the kind of person who bought beautiful rooms and then sat alone inside them counting what others could not reach. One morning, while reviewing financial plans with Richard, I brought up the idea I had mentioned as a test to my family. What if I actually did create a foundation? He looked at me over his glasses. That depends. Do you want to help people? Or do you want to run an organization? I don't know the difference yet. Then we start there. He did not romanticize it. That was why I trusted him. He explained legal structures, charitable compliance, staffing, oversight, evaluation, fraud prevention, donor rules, and the difference between writing checks and building sustainable programs. I wanted to help people who had been made to feel worthless after losing stability. People like me after the layoff. Women leaving controlling relationships. Single parents one emergency away from eviction. Students whose futures depended on fees their families could not pay. Workers who had lost jobs and needed training, not lectures. The name came to me late one night while I was sitting in the study with a notebook open. The Open Door Foundation, because that was what I had needed when my own family closed theirs. We began small. Richard helped assemble a legal team. Olivia introduced me to nonprofit consultants in Denver. I hired an executive director named Marisol Vega, a sharp, warm woman who had spent 15 years working in housing stability programs and had no patience for wealthy people who wanted charity to feel like a photo opportunity. At our first meeting, she looked me directly in the eye and said, "Do you want praise or impact?" "Impact," I said. "Good. Praise wastes time." I hired her on the spot. The work became the first thing in years that made me wake up eager. We started with emergency rent assistance for families facing eviction, small scholarships for community college students, job retraining grants, and legal aid partnerships for women leaving coercive households. We built rules, applications, review boards, follow-up processes. I learned quickly that generosity without structure could create chaos, but structure without compassion could become another locked door. So I did both. I signed checks, yes, but I also showed up. I sat in meetings with mothers who cried because 1 month of rent meant their children could stay in the same school. I listened to a man in his 50s explain that after being laid off, every interview made him feel younger and older in the worst ways. I met a 19-year-old student who had nearly dropped out because she could not afford textbooks and transportation in the same week. Every story rearranged me. Pain, when treated with dignity, did not shrink people. It revealed how hard they had been fighting. The first time a woman hugged me after receiving housing assistance, I stiffened. Not because I did not want the hug, but because gratitude given freely felt unfamiliar. My family had taught me that giving created claims, debts, expectations. At the foundation, giving created breath. That changed me more than money ever could. 6 months after moving to Denver, we hosted a small donor dinner. I hated the idea at first. Rich people in a room talking about hardship over catered salmon sounded like exactly the kind of hypocrisy I wanted to avoid. Marisol convinced me otherwise. Good programs need allies, she said. You don't have to flatter them, just show them the work. The dinner took place in a warm event space with brick walls, candles, simple flowers, and photographs from the programs displayed respectfully along one side. No poverty staged for pity, no sad music, no speeches designed to make donors feel like saviors, just facts, stories, and a clear invitation to help. I wore a dark blue dress and simple jewelry, nothing flashy. I no longer needed clothing to prove I was not failing. I was speaking with a woman who ran a local education fund when a man approached. Grace Miller? I turned. He was tall, maybe late 30s, with dark hair, kind eyes, and the relaxed confidence of someone comfortable in himself. Not showy, not slick. His suit fit well, but he wore it like clothing, not armor. Yes, I'm Nathan Caldwell. I run a software company here in Denver. Marisol invited me. He extended his hand. His handshake was warm, steady. I've been reading about Open Door, he said. The rental assistance model is smart. You're not just delaying crisis. You're pairing it with counseling and job support. Most men, upon learning about the foundation, said things like amazing work or so inspiring before glancing around for someone more important. Nathan asked about structure. That caught my attention. You read the program brief? I asked. I did. Most people skim the first page. I'm a founder. I respect a good system. I smiled despite myself. Then you should talk to Marisol. She built most of the operating model. I'd like that, but I wanted to meet you too. There was no hunger in the way he said it. No calculation. He did not look at my jewelry, did not scan the room for signs of my net worth, did not carry the tense eagerness of people who sensed money nearby and wanted to stand closer. He looked at me. Just me. We talked for 40 minutes, then an hour. Nathan asked how we selected cases, how we prevented dependency, how we measured outcomes without turning people into statistics. He told me about his company's apprenticeship program for people without traditional degrees. He spoke about failure without shame, which I noticed immediately. My first company collapsed, Sloan, he said. Spectacularly. I was 29 and thought my life was over. What happened? I discovered life is annoyingly persistent. I laughed. He smiled. Then I built something better, but only after I stopped pretending I wasn't devastated. The honesty of that sentence landed somewhere deep. My family had treated failure like a stain. Nathan spoke of it like whether he had survived. At the end of the night, he walked me to the entrance. I like talking with you, he said. I like talking with you too. I'd like to take you to dinner, not to discuss donor strategy, just dinner. I should have hesitated longer. I did hesitate inside. I thought of Daniel, of charm becoming control, of love offered like a contract with hidden clauses. I thought of my mother telling me to crawl back to him. I thought of how wealth complicated everything, how anyone who knew too much might want too much. Nathan seemed to sense the pause. No pressure, he said. And if the answer is no, I'll still fund the apprenticeship partnership because it's a good idea. That made me laugh again. Yes, I said. Dinner would be nice? We went slowly. Pain had made me cautious, but not closed. That distinction mattered. Our first dinner was at a small Italian restaurant where Nathan knew the owner and still insisted on sitting at a quiet corner table instead of making a performance of being recognized. He asked about books, music, the mountains, whether I had always liked Chicago, whether Denver felt like home yet. He did not ask how much money I had. Not once. On our fourth date, I told him I had won the lottery. We were walking through a park after coffee, late afternoon light turning the grass gold. I stopped near a bench and said, "There's something you should know before this goes further." He listened without interrupting. I told him the basic truth, the prize, the family fallout, the move, the foundation. When I finished, he was quiet. Too quiet. My stomach tightened. That's usually the part where people change. He looked at me then. I'm trying to decide whether saying I'm sorry is insulting when the money also gave you freedom. That was so unexpected that I stared at him. He continued. So I'll say this. I'm sorry for what it cost you, and I'm glad you survived with your heart intact. I looked away quickly because my eyes had filled. No one had said anything like that to me. Not congratulations, not how much, not what about us, what it cost you. That was when I began to trust him, not completely. Trust is not a door you throw open after surviving a fire. It is a window you unlock slowly, checking the air each time. But Nathan was patient. He respected boundaries without making himself a martyr for it. He never showed up uninvited, never pushed for details I was not ready to give, never made jokes about my money in front of others. When he donated to Open Door, he did it through proper channels and asked Marisol for accountability reports like every other serious donor. 6 months after we met, I invited Aunt Clara to Denver. She arrived with one suitcase, 3 books, and a knitted shawl she insisted I needed because mountain evenings have opinions. When she met Nathan, she studied him over dinner with the gentle intensity of a woman who had survived enough family drama to recognize danger beneath manners. After he left, she looked at me. "Well?" I asked. "He listens," I smiled. "That's your assessment? It's rarer than it should be." Then she added, "He looks at you like you are a person, not a prize." I slept well that night. By the end of that year, Open Door had grown beyond anything I expected. We had helped dozens of families avoid eviction, funded scholarships, supported job training, and built partnerships with local businesses willing to hire people who needed second chances, not pity. One afternoon, after a meeting with Marisol, I stood in the foundation office watching a young woman cry because her tuition balance had been cleared. She kept saying, "I thought I had to quit. I thought I had to quit." I thought of Rebecca's children, Ethan's children, the guilt he had tried to plant in me. And I realized something important. I was helping someone's children, many people's children. I had not become selfish by refusing to hand money to relatives who felt entitled to it. I had become honest about what help should be. Help should not require humiliation. Help should not be demanded by people who despised you when you were powerless. Help should not be payment for conditional love. That evening, Nathan came over with takeout because I had forgotten to eat. We sat on the terrace, under blankets, the mountains dark against a violet sky. "You look lighter," he said. "I feel lighter." "Good day?" "A hard one, but the good." He opened a container of noodles and handed me chopsticks. "Tell me." So I did. I told him about the student, the foundation, the strange piece of realizing I could love my niece and nephew without letting Ethan use them as leverage. I told him that, for the first time, I did not feel guilty for being unreachable. Nathan listened. When I finished, he said, "You built the table they refused to give you." I looked at him. The words moved through me slowly. A table, not theirs, mine. One where people came with need, yes, but also with dignity. One where no one had to prove they were successful enough to deserve warmth. One where empty chairs were invitations, not punishments. I reached for his hand. In the distance, the mountains disappeared into night. For the first time, I was not waiting for my family to realize my worth. I was too busy living inside it. Aunt Clara called me on a rainy Thursday afternoon, nearly a year after I left Chicago. By then, Denver had begun to feel less like an escape and more like a life. The mountains no longer startled me every morning. The house no longer felt too quiet. I had favorite coffee shops, a preferred grocery store, a walking route, neighbors who waved but did not pry, and a rhythm that belonged to me instead of to survival. Open Door was growing steadily. Marisol had hired more staff. We had expanded the scholarship program, strengthened the rent assistance fund, and launched a partnership with Nathan's company to train adults without college degrees for entry-level tech support roles. It was not glamorous work. It was paperwork, interviews, budgets, compliance, tears, hard decisions, and occasional miracles. I loved it. I loved the practical mess of helping people. I loved that no one at the foundation worshipped me for my money. Marisol corrected me when I was wrong. The staff argued over policy. Applicants sometimes frustrated us, sometimes humbled us, sometimes reminded me that dignity was not something you handed down from above. It was something you protected in the way you helped. That afternoon, I was sitting in my office at the foundation, reviewing a report on student retention, when Aunt Clara's name lit up my phone. I answered immediately. "Hi, Aunt Clara. Are you alone?" I leaned back in my chair. "That depends on whether you're about to tell me something that requires wine. Maybe tea first." I closed the report. "What happened?" She sighed. "Your mother called me again." Something in my chest tightened, but not the way it used to. Once, any mention of my mother could turn my whole body into a locked door. Now it was more like hearing thunder far away. Unpleasant, but not dangerous. What did she want this time? What she always wants. You. I looked out the office window. The rain slid down the glass in silver lines. She wants me, or she wants my money? Aunt Clara gave a dry little laugh. She has learned not to say the second part out loud. Progress. Not exactly. I waited. She told me you abandoned the family during a crisis. A crisis? Apparently, the crisis is that they do not know where you live, cannot call you, and have no way to explain to other people why you disappeared. I closed my eyes briefly. Not why I left, why they could not explain it. That was always the injury that mattered most to my mother. Not harm done in private, but humiliation visible in public. What is she telling people? That you changed after coming into money, that you became arrogant, that you cut them off for no reason, that she still prays every night you will come to your senses. I laughed quietly. Of course she does. There's more. There always is. Aunt Clara hesitated. That hesitation made me sit up. What? She has been posting on Facebook again. I rubbed my forehead. About ungrateful children? Yes. Mothers who sacrifice everything. Daughters who forget where they came from. Family being more important than money. That kind of thing. Does she mention that she told me not to come to Christmas Eve because my failure was contagious? No. Funny how that detail never makes the post. No, it doesn't. I spun slowly in my chair, watching the rain blur the street outside. A year ago, hearing that would have filled me with the need to defend myself. I would have wanted screenshots, witnesses, explanations. I would have drafted responses in my head until midnight. I would have imagined showing everyone the truth like evidence in court. Now I only felt tired, not defeated. Just tired of people who needed lies to keep their dignity intact. What does she want from you? I asked. She wants to know if I've heard from you. And what do you say? That I haven't. A warmth moved through me. Thank you. She doesn't believe me. She shouldn't. You're a terrible liar. I am an excellent liar when the cause is righteous. That made me smile. Then Aunt Clara's voice softened. She also asked if I knew whether you had spent all the money yet. I stopped smiling. There it is, I said. She said people who get sudden money usually lose it quickly. She thinks once reality catches up, you'll come home. Home. The word tasted strange. My parents' house had not been home in years. If it ever had been. It had been a stage, a courtroom, a place where love was handed out in careful portions and withdrawn when you embarrassed the family picture. She said, Aunt Clara continued carefully, that when you come back, she is willing to forgive you. I stared at the wall. Then I laughed. Not like the night after Christmas. Not hysterically, not with tears. This laugh was smaller, cleaner, almost amazed. She forgives me, I know, for disappearing after they harassed me at my own house. Yes, for not giving them money after they treated me like a disease. Yes, for refusing to let them use my life like an inheritance. Yes, how generous of her. Aunt Clara laughed too, but softly. Are you all right, honey? I thought about the question. There had been a time when the answer would have been complicated. I would have said yes while bleeding inside. I would have said I was fine because I did not know how to explain grief that came from living relatives. But that day, sitting in my office while rain tapped against the window and people worked down the hall because of something I had built, the answer felt simple. I am, I said. I really am. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a long time. My mother thought I would spend everything and crawl back. The idea should have offended me. Instead, it revealed how little she had ever known me. Even when I had nothing, I had been careful. Even when unemployed, humiliated, and afraid, I had not collapsed. She had mistaken my pain for weakness because that version of me suited her. Now she mistook my wealth for recklessness because that version allowed her to wait for my failure like justice. She still wanted the story to end with me at her door, broke, ashamed, ready to apologize. But some doors close so completely that even memory cannot open them. That evening, Nathan came over with groceries and a bottle of wine. He had a key by then, though he never used it without texting first. That was one of the small things I loved about him. He never turned access into ownership. I told him what Aunt Clara had said while he chopped vegetables in my kitchen. "My mother forgives me," I said. Nathan paused with the knife in his hand. "Does she?" "Apparently." "For what crime?" "Escaping." He nodded as if considering a legal theory. "Serious offense. Very serious. Also, she thinks I'll come back once I spend all the money." Nathan looked around the kitchen at the warm lights, the flowers on the counter, the folder of foundation reports beside my purse. "Should I hide the gold-plated cereal bowls?" I threw a dish towel at him. He laughed, and the sound filled the kitchen so naturally that for a moment I had to look away. Happiness still surprised me sometimes. Not dramatic happiness, not the kind that announces itself with music and bright lights. The everyday kind. Someone chopping vegetables, rain at the windows, a joke landing where fear used to live. Later that night, after dinner, we sat on the couch with our feet tangled under a blanket. The house smelled of garlic, wine, and rosemary. Nathan traced slow circles over the back of my hand. "Do you ever want to see them again?" he asked. He did not ask it like a challenge. That mattered. He never pushed forgiveness like a moral performance. He never told me I would regret boundaries. He never said blood was blood, as if biology could repair what behavior destroyed. He only asked because he wanted to understand the shape of my peace. I thought carefully before answering. "No." The word came out without anger. That surprised me most. "No," I repeated. "I don't think I do." Nathan waited. "I used to imagine a moment where they would finally understand," I said. "Where my mother would apologize. Where my father would admit they were wrong. Where Rebecca would say she was ashamed. Where Ethan would stop using his children to make me feel guilty. I thought if they just understood how badly they hurt me, something could change. And now? Now I think they understood enough." The room was quiet. I looked toward the window where the city lights glittered faintly beyond the glass. They knew excluding me from Christmas would hurt. They did it anyway. They knew calling me a failure would humiliate me. They did it anyway. They knew showing up at my house after I asked for space would scare me. They did it anyway. The problem was never that they didn't understand. The problem was that my pain did not matter until it blocked their access to money. Nathan's hand tightened gently around mine. "That is a hard thing to accept." "Yes," I said. "But accepting it is easier than arguing with it forever." A few months later, Nathan proposed. It was not public. There were no photographers hiding behind trees, no restaurant full of strangers clapping, no dramatic speech designed to become a video. He knew me better than that. It happened on the terrace at sunset. We had spent the day visiting one of Open Door's job training sites, where Nathan's company had helped build a computer lab. Afterward, we came home exhausted but happy. I changed into jeans and a sweater. He made tea. The sky turned lavender behind the mountains. I was leaning against the railing, watching the last light move across the peaks, when Nathan said my name, not casually. Carefully, I turned. He was standing a few feet away, holding a small velvet box. For a second, the world became very still. "Grace," he said, and his voice shook slightly. I had never seen him so nervous. "I know peace cost you more than people realize." I know you had to build walls because the people who should have protected you became the ones you needed protection from. I don't want to tear those walls down. I want to be someone you choose to open the gate for." My throat tightened. He stepped closer. "I love your strength, but I don't love you because you're strong. I love you when you're tired. I love you when you're cautious. I love you when you ask the same question 3 different ways, because trust still feels dangerous. I love the woman who built a foundation because she knew what it felt like to be shut out. I love the woman who still cries at student thank you letters and pretends she isn't crying." I laughed through tears. He opened the box. The ring was beautiful, simple, elegant, nothing designed to prove he could afford me. "I want a life with you," he said. "Not your money, not your story, you, if you want that too." For a moment, I could not speak. A younger version of me would have searched his face for hidden conditions, would have wondered what marriage would cost, what parts of myself I would be expected to trade, how long before love became management. Daniel had made marriage sound like a beautiful cage. Nathan made it sound like a door we could walk through together. "Yes," I said. The word came out as a whisper, then stronger. "Yes." He slipped the ring onto my finger, and I kissed him with the mountains turning dark behind us. When I called Aunt Clara, she cried so loudly that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "I knew it," she said. "You did not." "I did. The man listens. I told you." "That was your whole assessment." And I was right. We planned a small wedding for early June. Small meant 22 people. Aunt Clara, Marisol, a few close friends from Denver, 2 of Nathan's longtime friends, his sister and her husband, a handful of colleagues who had become family in the way people do when they show up without demanding ownership. No Millers. Not my mother, not my father, not Rebecca, not Ethan. I did not debate it. That, more than anything, told me how far I had come. Once, I would have made myself sick over the decision. I would have imagined their reactions, their hurt, their accusations. I would have wondered whether not inviting them made me cruel. I would have allowed the ghost of my mother's voice to sit at every planning meeting, sighing over flowers and guest lists and what people would think. Instead, I chose peace like a practical item. Venue, garden outside Denver. Flowers, white roses, lavender, and wild greenery. Dinner, simple, beautiful, warm. Family drama, none. Aunt Clara arrived 3 days before the wedding with 2 suitcases, a hat box, and a warning that she intended to be useful. "You are a guest," I told her at the airport. "I am an aunt. That outranks guest." She hugged me so tightly I stopped arguing. That night, we sat in my kitchen drinking tea while Nathan took a call in the study. Aunt Clara looked around the room with soft eyes. "You made a home," she said. "I think so." "No, you did." I turned my mug in my hands. "Does Mom know about the wedding?" "Yes." Aunt Clara hesitated just long enough. I looked up. "She knows?" "She suspects." "How?" "Rebecca saw something online, not your page," she added quickly. "You're locked down, but someone posted a photo from a donor event where you and Nathan were standing together. Your ring was visible." I glanced down at my hand. Of course, no matter how carefully you disappear, old lives sometimes find shadows. "What did they say?" "Your mother called me within an hour." I leaned back. "Let me guess. She was heartbroken that her daughter got engaged and didn't tell her." "More or less." "Did she ask if I was happy?" Aunt Clara's silence answered. I smiled sadly. "No. She asked if he knew about the money." I closed my eyes. "Of course she did. She said you were vulnerable and that men can take advantage of women with money." That would have been more convincing if she hadn't once told me to go back to Daniel because he had a house. Aunt Clara's mouth tightened. I reminded her of that. "You did?" "I am old, not dead." I laughed. "She did not appreciate it," Aunt Clara added. "I imagine not. She also said weddings are family events." "They can be." She said a daughter who excludes her mother from her wedding will regret it forever. I looked toward the hallway where I could hear Nathan's low voice through the study door. "Maybe," I said, but a bride who invites people who hurt her just to avoid guilt might regret that more. Aunt Clara reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. You are allowed to have one beautiful day without handing anyone a knife. I did not cry then, but later, while brushing my teeth, I did. Not because I doubted my decision, because someone had finally said aloud that my happiness did not require opening the door to people who had already cut me. The wedding day arrived clear and bright. June in the foothills carried a softness I had never known in Chicago. The garden we rented sat outside the city, surrounded by trees, lavender beds, and a view of distant mountains. There were white chairs arranged on the lawn, simple flowers tied to the aisle seats, and a small wooden arch covered in greenery. No chandeliers, no marble, no performance, just air, light, and people who had come because they loved us. I wore a dress with clean lines and lace sleeves. Aunt Clara helped button it in the bridal suite, her hands careful at my back. You look like yourself, she said. I watched her reflection in the mirror. Is that good? It's the best thing. My eyes stung. She adjusted my veil, then placed both hands on my shoulders. Before we go out there, she said, I want you to hear something. Your mother's absence is not a hole in this day. It is a boundary protecting it. I swallowed hard. I needed that. I know. Nathan cried when he saw me. Not dramatically. Just enough that his sister handed him a tissue and everyone laughed softly. I walked down the aisle alone because that felt right. Not abandoned. Not lacking. Alone as in whole. Alone as in no one was giving me away because I belonged to myself first. When I reached Nathan, he took my hands. You came, he whispered. I said I would. I know. I just like seeing it. Our vows were simple. He promised to listen before assuming, to protect peace without controlling it, to build a life where love did not require shrinking. I promised to stay honest even when fear made me quiet, to choose partnership over performance, to let joy have room in the house I had built from survival. When the officiant pronounced us married, the applause was warm and small and real. No one interrupted. No one objected. No one demanded to know why they had not been consulted. No one used the word family like a weapon. At the reception, we ate under strings of lights as evening settled over the garden. Marisol gave a toast that made everyone laugh, describing me as the only billionaire-adjacent woman I know who still argues over office supply budgets. Nathan's sister told a story about him as a teenager trying to fix a computer with a butter knife. Aunt Clara stood last. She raised her glass. I have known Grace since she was a little girl with serious eyes and too many thoughts for one small body, she said. Some people spend their lives trying to make thoughtful people quieter. I am grateful Grace did not become quiet. I am grateful she became free. Nathan, thank you for loving her in a way that gives her more room, not less. That was all. Brief, beautiful, enough. I cried openly. So did Nathan. After dinner, we danced beneath the lights. I was not a graceful dancer, but Nathan held me like grace was not required. Guests joined us. Aunt Clara danced with Marisol. People laughed. Someone spilled champagne. The cake leaned slightly to one side because the garden was not perfectly level, and somehow that made it better. Near the end of the night, I stepped away for a moment. I stood at the edge of the garden, looking back at the tables. 22 people. No empty chairs used as punishment. No one sitting far away to avoid being touched by my failure. No one pretending peace meant my absence. Nathan found me there. You okay? He asked. Yes. He followed my gaze. Thinking about them? I did not pretend not to understand. A little. Do you wish they were here? I looked at the lights, the flowers. Aunt Clara laughing with Nathan's sister. Marisol fixing the leaning cake with the seriousness of an engineer. No, I said. The word was gentle, final. If they were here, I continued, this day would have become about them. Their hurt, their pride, their right to be included, their anger over the money. My mother would have cried loudly enough for people to ask questions. Rebecca would have watched every detail and calculated what it cost. Ethan would have pulled me aside to talk about the children. My father would have acted wounded that he didn't walk me down the aisle, even though he never once asked whether I needed him. Nathan stood beside me quietly. "This day stayed ours," I said. "That means I made the right choice." He kissed my temple. "Yes," he said, "you did." After the honeymoon, life did not become perfect. That is important to say. Happy endings are not the absence of hard days. They are the presence of safety when hard days come. Open Door faced funding challenges. One program had to be redesigned after the first model failed. A family we helped lost their housing anyway because the system around them was crueler than one grant could fix. I had nights when old memories returned without warning. Sometimes a particular tone of voice in a meeting made me feel 32 and unemployed again. Sometimes I dreamed of my mother's dining room and woke with my hands clenched. But when I woke, Nathan was there. Not to fix me, to remind me where I was. Our home became lived in. Shoes by the door, books stacked on both nightstands, grocery lists on the fridge, foundation reports beside Nathan's laptop. Aunt Clara visited twice a year and rearranged my plants every time. We hosted dinners, real ones, with mismatched conversations and too much food. People sat wherever they liked. I bought a dining table for our house in Denver. Not the largest one, not the most expensive. The right one, warm wood, long enough for friends, round-edged, inviting, sturdy. The first night we used it, I stood in the doorway before guests arrived and looked at the chairs. No chair felt like a threat. That almost made me cry. By the following September, Open Door had funded scholarships for 50 students, helped 30 families remain housed, and enrolled more than 100 adults in training programs. We had lawyers, accountants, social workers, volunteers, donors, critics, problems, and plans. It was real in the way only imperfect things can be real. One afternoon, I visited a community college where several of our scholarship students were starting classes. A young man named Jordan showed me his schedule like it was a winning lottery ticket. "I'm the first in my family," he said, trying to sound casual and failing completely. "That's a big thing," I said. He nodded. "My mom cried in the parking lot." I smiled. On the drive home, I thought about Ethan's children again. The guilt had faded, but not the tenderness. They were innocent. They had loved me in the uncomplicated way children love adults who listen to their stories and admire their drawings. For a long time, that had been the only part of the family wound that still ached sharply. I talked about it with Nathan that evening. "I wonder sometimes if I should have set up something for them quietly," I said. "Not for Ethan, for the kids." Nathan did not answer quickly. We were sitting in the living room, rain tapping against the windows. He closed the book he had been reading. "Do you want to?" "I don't know." "That usually means not yet." "I hate that they might suffer because their father is entitled. That is not your fault." "I know. Do you?" I looked at him. He was not accusing me. He was asking the hard question kindly. "I'm getting there," I said. He moved closer. "You built a foundation that helps children, students, families, people who need a chance. You did not stop being generous. You stopped letting generosity be extorted." I leaned my head against his shoulder. "That sounds very wise. I married up. It improved me." I laughed. He was right. I was helping, not them, not directly, not under pressure, not as payment for being allowed back into a family that only valued me when I became useful. But I was helping more people than I ever could have helped if I had handed my fortune to people who saw it as overdue compensation for tolerating me. Aunt Clara called a few days later with the latest report from Chicago. "I wasn't going to tell you," she said. "Then why are you telling me?" "Because you asked me not to protect you from information, only from contact." "Fair. Your mother is still telling people you abandoned her." "Of course. But the story is wearing thin." That caught my attention. "How so?" "People have noticed the timeline doesn't make sense. You disappeared after Christmas? Yes, but she keeps avoiding details about what happened before. Rebecca apparently complained to the wrong person that you bought a house and refused to help with her mortgage. That person asked why you would refuse if everyone had been so close. I almost smiled. And? And Rebecca said something about misunderstandings during the holidays. Misunderstandings. My favorite word for cruelty that wants to stay respectable. I laughed. You're getting sharper with age. I have always been sharp. People were simply not listening. What about Ethan? He is quieter now. Your father, too. Your mother is the one keeping the tragedy alive. Does she still think I'll come back broke? She has adjusted the theory. To what? That Nathan controls you. I closed my eyes. Of course. If I'm not failing, a man must be responsible. She says he probably turned you against the family. Nathan didn't even know me when they uninvited me from Christmas. Facts have never been your mother's favorite tool. I laughed again, but there was no pain in it. Only distance. After we hung up, I sat alone in the kitchen for a while. The late afternoon sun fell across the table. On the counter sat a thank you card from a student, a grocery list in Nathan's handwriting, and a vase of flowers Aunt Clara had insisted looked better there than in the hallway. My mother was still telling stories. Rebecca was still protecting herself. Ethan was still probably waiting for guilt to do what pressure had not. My father was still silent in the way men call dignity when they do not want to apologize. And I was still here, unreachable, loved, useful, free. That was the true ending. Though endings are rarely dramatic when they are healthy. No courtroom scene, no public exposure, no moment where my mother fell to her knees and begged forgiveness while everyone finally saw the truth. Life is not always generous enough to give you witnesses. Sometimes closure is private. Sometimes it is sitting at your own kitchen table and realizing you no longer need the people who hurt you to agree that they hurt you. That winter, almost 2 years after I won the lottery, Nathan and I hosted Christmas Eve. My first instinct had been to avoid the holiday forever. For a while, Christmas Eve had lived in my body like a bruise. The words failure spread still echoed when I saw decorated tables or family photos online. But Nathan suggested gently that maybe we could make something new. Not to erase it, he said, just to stop letting them own the date. So, we invited 12 people. Aunt Clara flew in. Marisol came with her wife. Nathan's sister brought her teenage son. 2 friends from the foundation joined us, along with an older couple from the neighborhood who had become unexpectedly dear to us. I cooked badly, so we hired a chef and pretended I had supervised. Aunt Clara made pie. Nathan burned the first batch of rolls and claimed it was a family tradition we were inventing. The house smelled like pine, butter, wine, and cinnamon. Before everyone sat down, I stood in the dining room doorway. The table glowed with candles. Every chair was full except 2 at the end, left open in case anyone wanted to move around, set down a bag, or sit later with dessert. They were not empty as punishment. They were simply chairs. Nathan came up behind me. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded. I was thinking about the last Christmas Eve with them. His hand found mine. I was so desperate to be wanted at that table, I said. I was going to give them everything. I know. And they thought removing me would protect their peace. He said nothing. I looked at the people laughing in the next room. Aunt Clara arguing with Nathan's nephew about whether pie needed whipped cream. Marisol helping open wine. Friends moving easily through my home. They did protect peace, I said. Nathan looked at me, just not the way they intended. At dinner, Aunt Clara asked everyone to say one thing they were grateful for. I almost groaned because it sounded dangerously sentimental, but by then she had already raised her glass, and no one argued with Aunt Clara. People said simple things: health, second chances, good friends, stable housing, new work, pie. When it was my turn, the table quieted. I looked at the faces around me. Not one of them needed me to fail to feel strong. Not one of them loved me because of what they could extract. Not one of them had left space around me as if pain were contagious. I'm grateful, I said slowly, for doors that close when you don't yet have the courage to close them yourself. Aunt Clara's eyes softened. Nathan squeezed my hand under the table. And, I added, smiling, for tables where every person is welcome because they are loved, not because they are performing success. No one knew the full weight of those words, except Nathan and Aunt Clara. That was enough. After dinner, while everyone drifted toward the living room, I stepped outside onto the terrace. Snow had begun to fall lightly, dusting the railing and softening the dark shapes of the trees. The mountains were hidden behind clouds, but I knew they were there. For years, I had believed winning the lottery was the miracle. It was not. The money was powerful, gave me choices, safety, distance, and the ability to help people in ways I had once only imagined. I would never pretend it did not matter. Poverty is not noble. Financial fear is not character building when it strips people of sleep, health, and dignity. Money mattered, but money alone did not save me. If I had announced that jackpot at Christmas Eve dinner, I might have spent the rest of my life funding the approval of people who had already shown me the price of belonging. I might have confused their sudden affection with love. I might have mistaken access for reconciliation. I might have stayed at that old table forever, smiling while they counted my worth in dollars. The real miracle was the phone call that broke my heart before I gave them everything. The real miracle was hearing my mother say failure spreads, while I already held proof that her judgment meant nothing. The real miracle was laughing through tears in my kitchen and understanding, finally, that being unwanted in the wrong room can be the beginning of freedom. Nathan stepped outside and placed a coat around my shoulders. "You disappeared," he said. "People are looking for the hostess." "I'm here." "I know." He stood beside me, both of us watching snow fall into the garden. "Do you ever think about what you'd say if they found you now?" he asked. I considered it. Once, I would have had speeches ready. Angry ones, brilliant ones, speeches that prove the timeline, expose the hypocrisy, forced apologies, reclaim dignity in front of witnesses. Now the answer was simpler. I'd say I hope they're well, I said. And then I'd close the door. Nathan smiled faintly. That's all? That's all. Because there was nothing left to win from them. No apology could give me back the Christmas Eve they took. No explanation could make their entitlement beautiful. No sudden regret could turn their demands into love. And no amount of money could buy the one thing I had finally given myself. Permission to leave. I won the lottery, yes. But the jackpot was not the number printed on that ticket. The jackpot was waking up in a home where no one mistook my kindness for weakness. It was building a foundation that opened doors instead of closing them. It was marrying a man who saw my boundaries as part of my beauty, not an obstacle to his comfort. It was having Aunt Clara at my table, laughing with people who had become family by choice. It was understanding that blood may explain where you began, but it does not get to decide where you belong. Most of all, it was this. I no longer needed to convince anyone that I was worth sitting beside. I had spent years trying to earn a place at a table where people moved their chairs away from me. Now I owned the house. I chose the guests, and every chair at my table was filled with peace.